announcements first.
Boy, the problem is that we'll start off with a real downer.
Yeah, I know. You want to do it at the end?
Yeah. The most important person of the moment has arrived. Good morning, Madam Secretary. And when we say good morning, we really mean good morning to you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 3 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of inquiry that seeks comment on the current state of programming diversity and the principal obstacles that independent programmers face in obtaining carriage on video distribution platforms. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that seeks comment on a framework for providing innovators, device manufacturers, and app developers the information they need to develop new technologies to access video content. Third, you will consider a second report and order that allocates responsibilities for the delivery of closed captions on video programming and the handling of captioning complaints. You will also consider a consent agenda as listed in the Commission's February 2016 Sunshine Notice. This is your agenda for today. The first item, entitled Promoting the Availability of Diverse and Independent Sources of Video Programming, will be presented by the Media Bureau, and Bill Lake, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. You can now catch your breath. Mr. Lake.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today, the Media Bureau presents a notice of inquiry that seeks comment on the principal challenges that independent video programmers face in gaining carriage of their content via both traditional and emerging distribution platforms. This notice of inquiry furthers the Commission's ongoing efforts to enhance the diversity of programming available to consumers. Independent video programmers repeatedly have expressed concern that certain practices of cable operators and other MVPDs may limit their ability to reach viewers and thereby stifle competition and innovation in the distribution of video programming. A central objective of multi-channel video programming regulation is to foster a diverse, robust, and competitive programming marketplace. As the agency charged by statute with implementing this objective, we seek to begin a fact-finding enterprise on the current state of programming diversity and to consider possible actions the Commission might take to address the concerns that have been raised and thereby foster independent sources of programming. Joining me at the table are Martha Heller, Raylan Remy, and Calisha Myers of the Media Bureau's Policy Division. Calisha will present the item.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we are pleased to present this notice of inquiry that provides an opportunity for industry stakeholders, consumers, and others to voice their concerns about the state of diversity, competition, and innovation within the video programming marketplace. Over the last quarter century, we have seen significant changes in the media landscape that have fundamentally altered the ways in which Americans access and consume video programming. Consumers today can access video programming over multiple competing platforms, and the dominance of cable operators and other incumbent pay TV distributors has eroded. However, incumbent operators retain a very important position in the video programming marketplace, and obtaining carriage from traditional MVPDs is still vital for the growth of many emerging programmers. Through this notice of inquiry, we invite comment generally on the state of independent programming marketplace and the challenges that new and emerging programmers face in attempting to launch or grow. We also seek comment on several specific challenges that have been identified in other proceedings. First, we seek comment on certain types of contractual provisions that are typical in program carriage agreements, including most favored nation and alternative distribution method provisions. Independent programmers have asserted that both types of provisions often hinder their ability to obtain distribution of their content. We also seek comment on issues related to carriage by over-the-top or OTT providers, including the costs and benefits to independent programmers of foregoing traditional cable or satellite carriage to pursue OTT carriage. Next, we seek comment on the impact that program bundling may have on independent programmers. MVPDs maintain that some large media companies with multiple program offerings, including vertically integrated programmers, are able to force them to carry less desirable content through bundling arrangements. Some parties aver that such bundling arrangements limit programming choices and raise costs for consumers by forcing MVPDs to accept less desirable content that displaces independent and diverse programming. In addition, we seek comment on the negotiation practices of MVPDs and whether discrimination is occurring against providers of public, educational, and governmental programming. Finally, we seek comment on the Commission's legal authority in this area and on what role, if any, we should play in addressing the obstacles that hinder providers of independent and diverse programming in reaching consumers. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this notice of inquiry and request editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Calisha, and welcome for your first presentation before the Commission. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Clyburn.
Agreed. While much has changed when it comes to the viewing habits of Americans since the passage of the 1992 Cable Act, multi-channel video programming distributors maintain significant influence in the ever-expanding video programming marketplace. Since my arrival here at the FCC in the summer of 2009, I have met with and spoken to dozens of independent programmers from extreme ends of the ideological spectrum. Politics and prose aside, they find agreement on three core issues. Each says that they are facing insurmountable challenges when it comes to acquiring program challenges, that it is difficult for them to receive fair or reasonable contract terms, and that the growth in their online distribution model is inhibited because program distribution access is often restricted via contract. During the recent AT&T-DirecTV merger, a number of these issues were raised yet again by many parties, including independent and network-affiliated programmers, as well as small cable operators who repeatedly requested relief. While we found that the issues raised were perhaps not best handled in the context of that merger, the level of concern I felt merited a separate proceeding where we could explore and gain a better understanding of the video programming marketplace and whether certain practices by operators, as claimed, are limiting the ability for them to reach their viewers. While I remain unsure that the Commission is the best place to answer or resolve the issues raised in today's notice of inquiry, we are enabling discussions about what role, if any, the Commission should play in addressing obstacles that may be preventing greater access by consumers to independent and diverse programming. This is a concern because fostering diversity of programming is an important goal of our work. Section 257 of the Communications Act tasks the Commission with carrying out the national policy of seeking to promote the purposes of favoring diversity of media voices, vigorous economic competition, technological advancement, and promotion of the public interest, convenience, and necessity. Does this provision give the agency the authority to act in this area, or are the same issues that independent programmers bring forth best resolved by other agencies or by industry-driven solution? The goal of this notice of inquiry is to launch a fact-finding exercises size that will start a conversation on how best to promote the availability of diverse and independent sources of video programming, including public, educational, and governmental programming. Any issue, Mr. Chairman, that brings together a content provider who campaigned very hard for my ouster and another who sings my praises surely merits a robust discussion. Again, I would like to thank the Media Bureau for this item, especially Martha Heller, Raylene Remy, Calisha Myers, well done, and Holly Sauer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So once again, you are the point where everything comes together, right? Okay.
Yes, they call that convergence, but it feels more like a storm sometimes.
Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Well, this is going to be more calm. Today, we have a dizzying array of channels available to consumers. We expect programming to be available anytime, anywhere, and on any screen. On top of that, novel platforms for content are cropping up here, there, and everywhere. The future of watching will not look like the past, and that's exciting. But despite all this change, old problems linger. Time and time again, we hear that independent programmers face a daunting challenge securing real estate on cable and satellite systems. These systems still dominate our video experiences, and securing carriage can be a prerequisite to building the viewership that in turn supports investment in more diverse content. This notice of inquiry tackles these issues and asks hard questions about new voices, new viewpoints, and the state of the market for independent programming. This is important because what we see on the screen says so much about who we are as individuals, as communities, and as a nation. And in this season of Oscars so white and female directors so few, starting a conversation about programming diversity and independent voices might be hard, but it's the right thing to do. And kudos to my colleague, Commissioner Clyburn, for encouraging us to get this conversation started.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was growing up, I didn't see many people on the screen who looked like me. One of the few such characters I remember was on the cartoon Johnny Quest, which was occasionally rerun in the late 1970s. The cartoon featured Haji, Johnny's sidekick, who, quote, picked up his smarts on the streets of Calcutta and had mystic powers. The only real-life recurring Indian-American character I can recall from the 1980s was Jawaharlal Chaudhary, one of a classroom full of gifted students on the ABC sitcom Head of the Class. And then, in the early 1990s, there was the famed Quickie Mart owner, Apu Nahasapima from The Simpsons, who was voiced by that noted Indian-American Hank Azaria. Things are different today. Netflix now carries Master of None, a series starring Aziz Ansari, who is also its co-creator and co-writer. The show focuses on the American-born son of Indian immigrants living in New York City, and it tells stories that I've never seen before on American television. As an American-born son of Indian immigrants myself, I especially enjoyed episode 2. Titled Parents, it examines the relationship between Asians who came to this country in the 1960s and 1970s and their American children. It's also notable that two of Ansari's closest friends on the show are a Chinese American and an African American lesbian. Needless to say, the show is a far cry from Leave It to Beaver. The stark contrast between the way things are and the way things were informs my approach to this notice of inquiry, or NOI. There are now more outlets through which creators of video content can distribute their programming than ever before. Over-the-top video, in particular, has been a game changer. It's given diverse voices a new way to be heard, and it's given Americans novel content they previously might never have seen. Consider the YouTube sensation Issa Rae and her hit series, The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl. When asked why she created the series, Rae said, "I felt like my voice was missing, and the voices of other people I really respect and admire and want to see in the mainstream are missing." The first part of her series, which she filmed with some friends, quickly got attention on YouTube. Thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign, Ray was able to raise over $65,000 through almost 2,000 donations and could complete the rest of the first season. To date, Ray has over 208,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel, and her shows have amassed over 20 million views, including my own. Last year, she published a collection of short stories, and late last year, HBO picked up her new series, Insecure. Now, diversity isn't limited to the production side of the video ledger. Consumers, too, are responding to the wide variety of content available through over-the-top services. As one researcher put it, multicultural viewers are more likely to have made over-the-top, or OTT, an integral part of their viewing lifestyle. 45% of African American viewers, 46% of Asian American viewers, and 51% of Hispanic viewers in the study report spending more than 20% of their total TV viewing time watching OTT, as compared to 39% of white viewers. Now, to be sure, there still may be some challenges in this brave new world of video. For instance, the NOI states that some independent programmers have expressed concern that certain carriage practices of cable operators and other multi-channel video programming distributors may limit their ability to reach viewers. I've heard these concerns firsthand in my own meetings with independent programmers like RFD TV. I'm therefore pleased that the Commission is giving all stakeholders the chance to provide feedback on the issues that we tee up in this NOI. As I've said many times, however, we are currently living in the golden age of television. One of the reasons for that is the amazing range of diverse content available to Americans today with the push of a button, the click of a cursor, or the connection of a dongle. It is important to remember that programs like Master of None or The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl are not the products of government regulation. Instead, they are thriving because of a free market, one in which creativity and technological innovation are recognized and rewarded. As the Commission moves forward in this and other proceedings, we should be careful not to hold back this video revolution. For Indian Americans today, kids today can now see themselves on the screen in roles far more varied as snake charmers and the producers of Quickie Mart squishies. That's a good thing, and we shouldn't hold it back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reading the item as originally circulated, there were a number of edits that I believed were needed and appropriate. One of the first of these was some slightly more concrete language in the statement of the primary goal of the proceeding. The avowed goals is to begin a conversation, as some of my colleagues had mentioned, on the state of independent and diverse programming, and I asked this to be changed from beginning a conversation to seek information, which in my view is a more appropriate goal for an inquiry of a federal regulatory agency. Of all my proposed edits, this seemed like the one that was the easiest of lifts, but surprising to me, this minor wordsmithing request was denied more than once, in fact, which left me to wonder why the Commission majority was so deeply wedded to this innocuous-sounding phrase, begin a conversation. And the more I thought about it, the more it became clear that beginning a conversation is not exactly accurate description of what's occurring here. Begin implies that this is somehow a novel topic that interested parties have not had the opportunity to weigh in on yet. However, as anyone who has ever followed media regulation issues is aware, the debate around program carriage, or lack thereof, is as close to as it gets as a constant fixture. For almost as long as there have been cable and satellite systems, programmers have been arguing that they need more carriage. We should all be able to agree that this conversation began long ago, at least in 1989, when the Commission's cable competition NOI included several timeless assertions. For example, some program suppliers also complain that rising concentration in cable system ownership has led to their inability to gain access to large cable systems. Programmers have found many sympathetic ears to their complaints, both in the Congress and at the Commission, both over the decades, From the least access system established by the 1984 Cable Act and the program carriage requirements of the 92 Cable Act to the Commission's 2011 modifications to its carriage rules and its common insistence of further carriage requirements as condition of NVPD mergers, there have been numerous legislative and regulatory attempts to address the challenges faced by independent programmers from many different angles. The technology has changed a lot since the debate began, but the arguments haven't changed substantially. We're now living in an age of 1,000-channel MVPD lineups, and many consumers seeking a different structure are rapidly adopting robust over-the-top offerings of linear and on-demand programming alike. Additionally, compelling content is being monetized to previously unimagined degrees on the web and mobile devices. In a world that has brought us this explosive growth in terms of the sheer number of potential platforms for content, it is interesting that access to the old network is still being considered a major issue. But with this debate, it seems the more things change, the more they stay the same. So if this item is not the beginning of a conversation, what is it in fact beginning? Many of you that have interest, of course, have not been able to read the document yet. But it should not come as a spoiler to say what we are beginning is more accurate description of the latest regulatory push. Though billed as a simple NOI laying out some questions to give platform more dialogue, almost every paragraph in the original draft was slanted in the direction of that push. I appreciate the many edits that Commissioner Pai and I submitted and were able to be adopted to this, and so I appreciate the work of the majority in adopting our changes. And so it allows me to concur with this item. Ultimately, however, I hope that these edits will be able to steer the proceeding into a conversation territory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got a statement for the record, but let me just begin by thanking Commissioner Clyburn for keeping this front and center with us and being the advocate that is the reason why it is on the agenda today, and for all of your leadership. This is a simple issue of how do we expand diversity of choice and opportunity, and it goes hand in hand with the next item we're going to be discussing, set-top boxes. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The item is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted with the objection noted. Carried. Thank you very much to the Bureau for all of your efforts on this. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will also be presented by the Media Bureau. It is entitled Expanding Consumers' Video Navigation Choices, Commercial Availability of Navigation Devices.
You know, Bill and Martha sit there. Some things just never change, do they? You know? Bill, you want to start?
Yes. Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today, the Media Bureau presents a notice of proposed rulemaking and memorandum opinion and order that proposes rules to ensure a competitive market for devices and apps that consumers can use in lieu of leased equipment to access cable and satellite video programming. These rules are intended to meet the Commission's obligations under Section 629 of the Communications Act. Joining me at the table are Martha Heller, Steve Brockhart, Brendan Murray, and Lyle Elder of the Media Bureau's Policy Division, and Scott Jordan, Chief Technologist of the Commission. Brendan will present the item.
Thanks, Bill. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we are pleased to present this notice of proposed rulemaking that is intended to ensure the availability to consumers of competitive sources of equipment used to access pay TV programming, as the Commission is directed to do by Section 629 of the Communications Act. Section 629, which just celebrated its 20th birthday along with the other provisions of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, directs the Commission to adopt regulations to assure a commercial market for devices and apps that can access video programming from sources other than the subscriber's pay TV provider, that is, cable or satellite provider. In short, it directs the Commission to untether consumers from the pay TV provider's leased set-top box. To achieve this directive, we propose to require multi-channel video programming distributors, MVPDs, to offer 3 information flows using any published transparent format that conforms to specifications set by open standards bodies. These information flows will allow manufacturers and other companies that are not affiliated with an MVPD to design and build competitive devices and applications to access the MVPD's video programming under the same terms of use under which the leased equipment or MVPD-designed apps can access the programming. Under this proposal, MVPDs could use different standards for their own user interfaces so as not to impede the competitive evolution of MVPD devices and apps. The proposal gives MVPDs flexibility to choose the security systems they use so that they can ensure that all video programming is protected and that only those who subscribe to a service are able to access it, provided that they each support at least one content protection system that is licensed on reasonable and non-discriminatory terms by an organization that is not affiliated with MVPDs. This approach is intended to balance MVPDs' rights to choose the content protection systems they use to protect programming with the need of manufacturers to be able to build devices that can access protected content from a variety of MVPDs that may use varied content protection systems. Next, the NPRM proposes parity rules that would require each MVPD that offers its own application on unaffiliated devices without the need for MVPD-specific equipment to also offer the three information flows to unaffiliated applications without the need for MVPD-specific equipment. With a particular eye towards consumer protections, the NPRM seeks comment on proposals to ensure that children's programming advertising limits, emergency alerts, and privacy protections will apply regardless of whether the consumer leases a set-top box from her pay TV company or uses a competitive solution to access video programming. The NPRM also proposes to adopt a billing transparency rule to ensure that consumers understand exactly how much they will pay each month for both programming service and equipment lease fees, and what the economic trade-off is between a leased device and any commercial alternative. The NPRM also asks a series of questions about alternate ways to implement Section 629, such as the MVPD app approach. The NPRM seeks comment on the best way to protect programmers' copyright and license terms, and the ability of various types and sizes of pay TV providers to comply with the proposal. Finally, the item includes a memorandum opinion in order that removes the so-called integration ban language from the Code of Federal Regulations as required under Section 106 of the Stella Act. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this NPRM and memorandum opinion in order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Thanks to everybody for all your hard work on this. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, sir. In 1996, as was mentioned, Congress added Section 629 to the Communications Act, which mandated this agency to take steps toward ensuring that a competitive navigation device market exists for access to multi-channel video programming. While prior Commission attempts in this area have been less than successful, standardization and technological advancements have made it easier to introduce competition and innovation into the set-top market. While these developments have resulted in some competition, consumers deserve more. Today's notice of proposed rulemaking seeks to give consumers more control in how they access the video services they subscribe to. It also attempts to promote innovation in the display, selection, and use of this programming. In short, choice. It would allow for the development of more user-friendly interfaces, opening the market to additional platforms that are not strictly under the purview and management of a single distributor. Today, 99% of the paid TV customers rent a set-top box from an MVPD at a cost that exceeds $200 per year. While the cost of other technologies have fallen as competition increased, the cost of the set-top box has risen by more than 3 times the rate of inflation for American paid TV subscribers over that same period. This item proposes, not adopts, but proposes to provide a technology-neutral means for consumers to choose how they interact with the multi-channel video programming services they pay for. If a consumer wishes to purchase a device or application to access this programming, this proposal will empower that choice. If a consumer chooses to continue to rent a box or app from their MVPD, they have the option to do that also. This item does not propose a specific technical standard like the Allvid proposal that the Commission considered back in 2010. Instead, a standard-setting body, in consultation with those affected, would lay out technical specifications enabling manufacturers, retailers, and companies, including the cable or satellite provider, to build and design navigation devices. There has been much discussion lately about how and if this proposal will affect content diversity, with some expressing concern that it could lead to decreases in the level of diverse programming choices. Sadly, we are only speaking about a paltry number of diverse channels that can be currently found over these systems today, but for the handful of those who have had success in being carried by an MVPD, I see no legitimate business or economic reason why this item should make their programming or the relationship with the distributor any more vulnerable than their counterparts. What I hope will occur is that creators of content who have been unable to get MVPD carriage may soon have a means to reach consumers directly. Similar to the way that internet searches provide consumers with information from various sources, a competitive solution with improved search functionality could allow consumers to find programming that is available over the top, something you cannot do with today's set-top boxes. These developments should result in consumers having a wider range of options. So I thank the Media Bureau for their hard work on this item, especially the efforts of Brandon Murray and Lyle Elder. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Here's an experiment. You can do it at home. Just sit in your favorite comfortable chair, you know, the one in front of the television, and in one hand, hold the remote control for your set-top box. In the other hand, hold your mobile phone. Now ask yourself, which of these two devices has changed substantially over the past 2 decades? Which has seen extraordinary innovation? And which has benefited from competition? The answers are obvious. The bulky, graceless mobile phones from 2 decades ago have been replaced by sleek new models. But it's a lot more than just aesthetics, because what we can do with these devices now is incredible. Smartphones have changed our lives and are changing our world. But the clunky set-top box and many buttoned remote have not evolved at the same pace, nor have they faced the same level of competition. The numbers make this very clear. 99% of consumers still rent their set-top boxes from their paid television provider. The typical household now spends more than $231 a year on those set-top box rental fees. Costs are high, innovation is slow, and competition is too limited. Congress did not want it to be this way. 2 decades ago, in the Telecommunications Act of 1996, this agency was charged with ensuring the commercial availability of navigation devices, creating a competitive market for set-top boxes. There are times when legislative directives are not clear. This is not one of them. I think we can do better, so I support today's rulemaking. But I also think we have a lot of work to do. Important questions have been raised about copyright, privacy, diversity, and a whole host of other issues in a marketplace that has been tough for competitors to crack. We will need to explore them in the record that develops. Let me raise one other. This rulemaking is complicated. It describes 3 information streams for navigation devices, work that needs to be done by standards bodies, a medley of security systems, and a trio of parity requirements. The most successful regulatory efforts are simple ones. More work needs to be done to streamline this proposal because in the end, for consumers to benefit and enjoy the bounty of what we have proposed, well, execution is all. So what we have here may or may not be the precise way forward, but something has got to give. I support Chairman Wheeler's effort to get this proceeding started because it's time, past time, to live up to our statutory obligations and give consumers the competition they deserve.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosenworcel, and your observations are well taken, and as you point out, the reason why we have rulemakings like this, so we can get that record built. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Someone with 3 set-top boxes in my home, I share the frustrations felt by millions of Americans across this country. These boxes are clunky, they're expensive, and I feel the pain each and every month when I have to pay my video bill. And as an FCC commissioner, I know that the current set-top box marketplace is the product of an intrusive regulatory regime. Something has to change. What should that change be like? What should be our aim when it comes to this marketplace? What would be the best for consumers? My goal is pretty simple. Our goal should not be to unlock the box. It should be to eliminate the box. If you are a cable customer and you don't want to have a set-top box, you shouldn't be required to have one. This goal is technically feasible, and it reflects most consumers' preferences, including my own. But in this notice, the FCC takes a much different tack. It doubles down on the necessity of having a box, substituting one intrusive regulatory regime for another. Essentially, it would introduce an entirely new set of boxes into consumers' homes. Because this proposal moves us further away from the objective of dropping the box, and because it takes a 20th century approach to a 21st century problem, I respectfully cannot support this notice. Let's start with one indisputable fact. When it comes to navigation devices, the FCC has not embraced free market policies. Instead, it's embraced a form of centralized planning. By implementing the so-called cable card regime and the integration ban, the FCC sought to mold the set-top box marketplace to its desired shape. But there's widespread agreement that the Commission's regulatory intervention has been a massive failure. Indeed, this notice repeatedly admits the rules failed to achieve their objective. The FCC's regulations have raised the price of set-top boxes, costing Americans billions of dollars in additional fees. They have increased cable customers' energy consumption by 500 million kilowatt hours each year, enough to power every home in the Washington, D.C. area for 3 months. And they have failed to produce robust competition in the set-top box market. Less than 2% of customers have purchased their set-top box at retail. Indeed, the failure of the FCC's policies is what brings us here today. But as we seek to trade one complex regulatory scheme for another, we should pause and ask ourselves a simple question. Will the result be any different this time around? Will the sequel be any better than the original? In my judgment, the answer is no, and this is for several reasons. First and foremost, this proposal is likely to produce a stalemate, not a newly competitive market. The cornerstone of the notice is the heavy reliance on open standards bodies operating through consensus. According to the Commission's proposals, MVPDs will be required to supply certain information in formats that conform to specifications set by open standards bodies. These open standards bodies, in turn, would consist of members representing all stakeholders and would develop standards by consensus. But would this consensus ever really happen? To date, the defining characteristic of this proceeding has been vigorous disagreement, with video distributors and content creators on one side and the consumer electronics industry on the other. We saw this in the Downloadable Security Technology Advisory Committee, or DSTAC. We have seen this in the run-up to today's vote, and I'm sure that we will see it in the comments that are submitted in response to this notice. Should we have confidence that a highly heterodox open standards body will suddenly become harmonious after the Commission issues final rules? If anything, when it's time to get down to the technical nitty-gritty of implementing these controversial regulations, I believe that it'll be harder, not easier, to reach consensus. Indeed, the odds are probably better that Mark Zuckerberg will agree to Kanye West's request for $1 billion. Second, there's a problem of timing. The Commission's rules will not have any impact for years. For example, the notice proposes that MVPDs would not have to implement these regulations until 2 years after their adoption. So even if all goes according to plan, and I think reasonable minds could doubt that it will, consumers probably wouldn't feel the effects for another 3 years. Now think about what 3 years means in the dynamic video marketplace. 3 years ago, there was no such thing as the Google Chromecast or the Amazon Fire TV stick. There's no telling what further innovation will occur over the next 3 years, but we know it'll happen, and we know it'll happen fast. So while MVPDs, the consumer electronics industry, and content creators spend years trying to implement the Commission's rules, technology could render all of that work obsolete by the time it's ready to roll out. That would be a waste of time, energy, and money for all involved. Third, if the standards envisioned by the Commission's proposal are ever actually implemented, the likely result is that consumers will have to deal with 2 boxes instead of 1. Much of the controversy surrounding this proposal has centered on whether it would require an additional box to be deployed in Americans' homes. Now, to be sure, the notice doesn't say in so many words that MVPDs would be required to provide customers with another box. But that, unfortunately, is likely to be the outcome if these rules are adopted and implemented. Here's why. In order to carry out the standards called for in this notice, MVPDs would likely have one of 2 options. First, they could make substantial changes to their network architecture. Or second, they could provide each customer with an additional box. Now, during my discussions with MVPDs in the weeks leading up to this meeting, each and every company has told me that it would be less expensive to deploy additional boxes in their customers' homes. So if the Commission's proposal is implemented, the American people will probably end up paying for more boxes, not fewer. Fourth, the proposal could hurt content creators. This proposal would allow set-top box manufacturers to profit from the content produced by others without paying those programmers. For example, nothing in this proposal would prevent a set-top box manufacturer from replacing the commercials in a television show with commercials sold by that manufacturer. And nothing in this proposal would prevent a set-top box manufacturer from adding commercials to a program. And to be clear, we could have foreclosed those possibilities. The drafters of this notice could easily have addressed content creators' legitimate concerns without compromising the core of this proposal. But they did not. Minority programmers are perhaps most at risk. That might explain why a wide variety of civil rights organizations, including the Rainbow Push Coalition, the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, and the LGBT Technology Partnership, among others, have expressed their opposition to this proposal. And that's why minority programmers are opposed to it as well. Now, this morning, I believe that Victor Serta of VME TV is with us. Victor, are you here? Victor is the head of VME TV, which is the first national Spanish-language television network in the United States to partner with public television. And it brings high-quality entertainment to Latino families. Along with representatives of other Latino organizations, Mr. Serta signed a letter this month opposing the Commission's proposals. He said that the Commission's proposal could, in his words, lead to a new round of TV redlining in which set-top box developers pick and choose what networks to show and drop Latino programming or bury it deep in the channel lineup or search results. Nothing in this proposal addresses that concern. Now, taking a step back, this notice promises a lot, but it probably will not deliver much. And most of what it will deliver is likely to be bad for American consumers and content creators. None of this had to be. For right now, we are en route to eliminating the need for a set-top box altogether. An app can turn your iPad or Android phone into a navigation device. MVPDs have deployed these apps and are in the process of developing more advanced ones. The Commission should be encouraging those efforts. But this proposal would do precisely the opposite. It would divert the industry's energies away from app development and toward the long-term slog of complying with the Commission's new regulatory scheme for unwanted hardware. And the notice actually goes further. It proposes a number of regulations that would discourage the development and deployment of MVPD apps. That's not what the American people want. I'm confident that most consumers would rather eliminate the set-top box altogether than embrace a complex regulatory scheme that will require them to have yet another box in their home and that won't take effect for at least 3 years. In fact, I dare say most consumers would urge the FCC to adopt a version of Neo's conversation in The Matrix. And if I might paraphrase, do not try and bend the set-top box marketplace. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. What truth? There is no set-top box. There is no set-top box? Then you'll see that it is not the set-top box that bends. It is only yourself. Now, all of this might explain the deep bipartisan concern on Capitol Hill about the FCC's approach to set-top box regulation. Senator Bill Nelson, the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Science, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, has told us to avoid taking any action that could ultimately threaten the vibrant market for quality video programming. A diverse group of 25 Democratic representatives, led by Congressman Tony Cardenas, has counseled restraint, saying that it is important for the government to not be overly prescriptive in regulation. Congressman Tom Marino and Ted Deutch have warned us that this proceeding could upset the delicate system that underlies the creation, licensing, and distribution of copyrighted television programming, and potentially jeopardize efforts to prevent copyright infringement. And Representatives Doug Collins, Judy Hsu, Lamar Smith, Adam Schiff, and Mimi Walters have expressed their concerns over the proposal's potentially adverse impacts on independent, minority, and religious content creators. I wish the Commission had listened to these voices rather than plowing ahead with a flawed proposal. Because it does not, I respectfully dissent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the years, I have spent considerable time on the policy issues involving set-top boxes. Past experience, along with surveying the current video landscape, has led me to conclude that the set-top boxes are a relic of the past. They are already well on their way to the fate of the video rental store. So why, in 2016, would the Commission be doing a set-top box item? If the idea of an agency maintaining its regulatory control by placing outdated regulations on new technology sounds familiar, you may be on the right track. In recent weeks, we have been subjected to a steady stream of hype about this item unlocking the box. Never let it be said that this Commission's propagandists have a hard time staying on message. But this particular catchphrase only papers over the destructive results to come in the video marketplace if the Commission proceeds to adopt the rules presented today. This proposal would be harmful to some extent for consumers as well as to almost every type of business involved in producing and distributing video content in many predictable ways, not the least is the unpredictable and unpredicted effects. It could also open MVPD networks to serious security vulnerabilities, exposing them to potential network damage and content theft. It could strip content producers of their rights to control the distribution and presentation of their content. It could ultimately subject OTTs to the same regime, as I will discuss later. Worst of all, it would certainly devalue the content produced by programmers, large and small, by enabling anyone capable of writing a complement app to turn on a free video stream of video content painstakingly cobbled together by an MVPD at great expense. The ultimate free rider problem. MVPDs, broadcasters, and independent programmers alike would all lose some incentives to keep doing what they do, and some would opt for the sidelines, leaving consumers with fewer video options. The Commission's response, to most of these concerns boils down to trust us. It will be okay. Or rather, trust currently non-existent entities like an organization that is not affiliated with MVPDs to come up with a security system that will protect content. And trust open standard bodies to set up acceptable specifications for any app developer to interact directly with an MVP network. Trust marketplace forces to keep presentation standards and advertising intact. The item is forced onto a few detours from this predictive path, resigned to merely seek comment on such basic questions as whether licensing can ensure adherence to copy control and other rights information and adequate content protection. Can it even be done? We don't know. Yet somehow, despite all of the open questions about who, how, where, when, the majority has so much faith in the ability of outside, unformed entities to save the day that the item tentatively concludes that there should be a 2-year deadline for compliance with the new rules. This is regulation by pure speculation. The statutory authority on which this fantasy rests is equally far-fetched. The section that discusses authority will long live a testament to the level of absurdity that can be achieved in 4 short paragraphs when 2 defenseless statutes fall down a rabbit hole into a land where words have no meaning. While billed as an attempt to enhance competition in the set-top box market, the item shoots miles beyond that narrow frame on its very first page, redefining statutory terms plainly referencing to hardware such as navigation device, interactive communications equipment, and other equipment to mean hardware or software, including apps. I don't know how much clearer the terms device or equipment could be in their intent to reference tangible physical hardware. If those words don't work to restrict the Commission, are there any that could? And I don't think that anyone here believes for a second that Stellar could have made it out of a single congressional committee in 2014 if the members had known it would be interpreted to allow the FCC to force MVPDs to stream all of their content for free to any app developer willing to jump through a few hoops. Getting back to the original question, why this proposal? The rationale stated is to achieve parity among competing interfaces, but at first glance, anyone can see that the exact opposite is what would result. The free content flow mandated by this item will be the one-way street from MVPDs to OTTs. In order to ever have parity, in order for an MVPD interface to ever be competitive with an OTT solution that integrates video from other MVPDs and other services, OTTs would need to be bound by the same rules and sending all their content to the MVPDs for free, and indeed to each other for free. In fact, I was told at one of the early DSTAC meetings this idea was brought up. It was quickly dismissed as outside the scope of both Stellar and the Commission's Title VI authority. So no one here is talking about making the one-way street a two-way street, or are we? As with 3D movie, you need to look through both red and blue sides of the glasses to see the whole picture. To make any sense of this item, it must be viewed together with the other half, the Commission's proposal to reclassify OTT as an MVPD. If both of these NPRMs are followed to their logical conclusions, an entire class of innovators who bear no similarities to MVPDs, except that they also offer video, will be redefined as MVPDs and subsumed into Title VI. Meanwhile, all MVPDs, whether existing or newly minted, will be forced to provide all of their content to each other under an FCC-mandated scheme. And providing the 3 flows to all comers will only be the beginning of the new regulatory burdens on OTTs captured by Title VI. Who wins? Why, the FCC, of course. This entire item is about trying to superimpose a 1990s concept on the current technology, when the basic idea itself is no longer relevant to the innovators now available. Set-top boxes or navigation devices effectively have been overtaken by events, or OBE. Today's consumers want access to video on any device they own. In response, content providers are meeting this demand through numerous offerings, including over-the-top and internet-based apps. Isn't it telling that consumers can already watch video from multiple sources on all of their devices without an FCC-mandated set-top box regime? They can even stream what they're watching between devices. The video marketplace seems to be doing just fine. And yet somehow, when it comes to an MVPD subscription video service, we need to step in and regulate the interface. Nonsense. Instead, I argue we should embrace the future, not the past. The application economy is weakening the MVPD video package before our very eyes. In fact, it's no longer about channels at all. Many consumers are watching programming by the individual program or even shorter segments. The entire video industry is moving away from a box mentality, and as such, we should reconsider the need for regulations to maintain a competitive set-top box marketplace. Change is a real challenge when the goal is to maintain control over the future using the paradigms of the past. As we have seen, the pursuit of this goal can lead to policy proposals based on Orwellian statutory interpretations and substantive thin air. But given the choice between disruptive technologies and disruptive regulations, no one should have any doubt on which side I am on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, this issue really is not complex. Congress has explicitly instructed us to assure that there are competitive navigation devices, be it a box or an app. There's no one software, one's hardware. The functionality is the same. The issue is whether you are forced to rent that box every month, after month, after month, or whether you are forced to rent that app every month, after month, after month. Congress was clear. They said there should be competition. Now, technology has advanced to a point where this is possible without changing the functioning of the pay TV system and its copyright protections and its security, whether an app or a box. And in fact, what we're beginning to discuss today is something that is very similar to what the cable industry itself once proposed. But let's dig down on each of those points for a second. First of all, Section 629 of the Communications Act, here on the screen, minces no words and leaves no doubt as to our statutory responsibility. No, they didn't print "shall" in red in the statute, but it is clear. But it is clear. The Commission shall. Now, you know, we've heard from some folks who always keep talking about how they're strict constructionalists about what the Congress told us to do or not to do, and suddenly reaching out to all kinds of wild, expansive suppositions. But it's pretty clear. Congress said the Commission shall. Now, there have been lots of wild assertions about this proposal before anybody saw it. But let's remember, this is the beginning of an information gathering process, which is why, frankly, it's disappointing that my two colleagues have made up their mind before all the facts are in and efforts are made to work on issues that have been identified. But let's stop for a second. There's been a lot of talk. Let's stop and let's look at how a set-top box works. Again, on the screen. And let's be clear that there is nothing that is different in the functionality between a hardware box and a software app. Number one, the cable system sends a message to the box that says, "What's on?" Number two, the cable system tells the box what it is entitled to, what kind of rights the subscriber has. Number three, the subscriber tells the box what they want. Number four, the box relays that choice back to the cable system. And number five, the cable system delivers the programming. Now let's look at what that structure would look like under this proposal. Yeah, that's a new slide that just got put up, except for the fact that it looks identical to the previous slide. There is identical service delivery. There is identical entitlement authorization. There is identical relaying of choice back to the cable system. And there is identical delivery of programming. So what's the difference? These are two systems that work the same. The difference is one's closed and one is open. The consumers have no choice today. The Congress mandated that consumers should have choice. So if the competitive box or app functions exactly like the box or app the cable system forces you to rent today, then the protections for copyright and security are the same. But let's be specific about some of the red herrings that we've heard raised. Nothing in this item requires a second box in the home. Say it as many times as you want. Try and spin it every way you want. Nothing in this item requires a second box in the home. Nothing in this item, likewise, requires consumers to stop using the system they have right now. It only creates the opportunity for them to have choice. There is no multi-billion-dollar re-engineering of cable systems, as we've heard, that is required. There's nothing in here that allows third parties to disaggregate cable content, sell advertising around it. There's a misrepresentation that's been made today with the assertion that this item does allow that. The assertion that it creates all kinds of opportunities for free riders. It takes the same product that goes through the cable system and the cable box today with the same structures and moves it through a different box requiring the same structures. As a result, existing copyrights and programming agreements are unaffected. Consumer privacy is protected. Emergency alerts are passed through, and child protection laws are unaffected. And nothing in this proposal slows down or stops cable innovation. In fact, we all know that history has been clear that innovation is a result of competition, not a result of a forced, you must rent this box from me month after month after month. And nothing changes minority programmer relationships with the cable companies. But it sure does create more opportunities for minority programmers to reach consumers through the internet. Finally, this is not a new topic for this agency. In 2010, the cable industry supported, and I quote, cross-industry approaches to develop a fully competitive and innovative retail video device marketplace. So the people who have said this is the end of the world actually supported a competitive video device and made 7 recommendations, which are consistent with today's proposal. Let me just highlight a couple of them. They're here in this letter you'll see on the screen. But the option to purchase video devices other than those supplied by the cable company. That's the cable industry saying that they support that. The option to access video content on the internet. The option to search for content across multiple sources, including the internet. This is what the cable industry proposed, and they have the list goes on to the next slide where there are others that I won't read you all, but as I say there, this is not inconsistent with what we're opening a discussion on and proposing today. So let's go back to where we started. This is not complex. The law mandates it. Technology allows it. The industry at one time proposed something similar to it. And consumers deserve a break and a choice. So we will call for the vote on the item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The item is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted with the objection noted. Thank you very much to the Bureau. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, third on your agenda today, the item will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. It is entitled Closed Captioning of Video Programming, Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Allison Cutler, Acting Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much. Well, look at this. CGB has decided to change the color of the name signs, tent cards. They also what? They also moved left. Now, wait a minute.
That's where you're sitting.
I was going to say, all things are relative here. Allison, go ahead, please.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Nearly 20 years ago, the Commission adopted its first set of rules governing the provision of closed captioning on television, enabling viewers who are deaf and hard of hearing to access television programming along with the rest of the general public. At the time, the Commission stated that it expected to revisit these rules as changes in technology and industry practices made it possible to improve both the availability and quality of captioning. The experiences of viewers over the past several years have confirmed the need to update these rules to achieve Congress's goal for all Americans to have equal access to video programs, particularly as these programs also become available on the Internet pursuant to the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. Today, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau presents you a report and order that would assign some of the responsibilities for the delivery of high-quality captions to entities that have direct control over the production of such captions on video programming. This item also addresses certifications by video programming entities and the handling of captioning complaints. The item provides for flexibility on ways to achieve compliance and balances the benefits that fully accessible programming can achieve for people who are deaf and hard of hearing with the impact these actions would have on industry. Joining me at the table today are Karen Pelt-Strauss, Deputy Chief of CGB, and Elliot Greenwald, Deputy Chief of the Disability Rights Office. Karen will give us context on the history of this proceeding, and Elliot will present the item. In addition to Karen and Elliot, I would like to thank Greg Heibach, Chief of the Disability Rights Office, Susie Rosen-Singleton, also in DRO, Michelle Carey, Mary Beth Murphy, Maria Malarkey, Diana Sokolow, and Jeffrey Newman of the Media Bureau, Sharon Lee and Tracy Randolph of Enforcement Bureau, and Marilyn Sohn and Susan Aaron of the General Counsel's Office for their work to support this item.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We have often heard it said that of all of the improvements in accessibility achieved in the last century for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, closed captioning was the most significant. As was true for the last item presented, the obligations for closed captions came from the 1996 amendments to the Communications Act, celebrated now by its 20th anniversary. But until February 2014, problems with the quality of captions had gradually been making television viewing with closed captioning increasingly difficult. In the years leading up to this order, consumers reported inconsistencies in the way that captions were being provided, with many people reporting that captions were often inaccurate, incomplete, and delayed behind the program's audio track. 2 years ago, the Commission took landmark steps to ensuring that TV programming contains high-quality captions that accurately reflect the dialogue and other sounds and music in the audio track, are synchronous with the program's audio, are complete from the beginning to the end of the program to the fullest extent possible, and do not block other important information or content in the program on the screen, such as characters' faces, text, or graphics needed to understand the program's content. However, that February 2014 order left open who would be responsible for achieving compliance with the new captioning quality rules. Back in 1997, when the Commission first adopted rules governing TV captioning, the Commission placed sole responsibility for the provision of captions on video programming distributors. But it's video programmers, not distributors, that are the ones that exercise the most control over captioning quality. They are the ones that work with the captioning agencies that both develop and insert captions on TV programs. For this reason, in a notice that accompanied the February 2014 order, the Commission sought comment on whether it was appropriate to divide the captioning responsibilities and to place some of the responsibilities addressing captioning quality and the provision of captions on video programmers. The item before you continues to place primary responsibility on the provision of closed captions on distributors, but recognizes that many problems dealing with caption quality originate during the production phase, which is under the control of video programmers. For this reason, the item allocates responsibility for caption quality to both distributors and programmers, making each entity responsible for the captioning issues that are primarily within each's control. We believe that this allocation of responsibilities will bring about better compliance and make enforcement of the new captioning quality rules easier and more effective. Elliot will now provide you with greater details about this item. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We are pleased to present the second report and order in the closed captioning quality proceeding. This item extends some of the responsibilities for the quality and provision of closed captioning to other entities involved in the production and delivery of video programming, revises procedures for the handling of complaints, revises video programmer certification requirements, and makes other procedural modifications. Specifically, this second report and order assigns responsibility for the quality of closed captioning to video programming distributors and video programmers, making each entity responsible for closed captioning issues that are primarily within its control. Video programmers are responsible for closed captioning problems that stem from production of the captions, as well as transmission of the captions up to the point where they're handed off to video programming distributors. Video programming distributors, in turn, are responsible for the quality problems that are the result of the distributor's faulty equipment or their failure to pass through the closed captioning data intact. The item also maintains current rules that place primary responsibility for the provision of closed captioning on video programming distributors, but also holds video programmers responsible for a lack of captions where they have failed to provide captions on non-exempt programs. In addition, it requires each video programmer to file with the Commission a certification that the video programmer is in compliance with the rules requiring the inclusion of closed captions and either is in compliance with the captioning quality standards or has adopted and is following best practices or is exempt from the captioning obligations. If exempt, the video programmer must include in its certification the specific exemptions claimed. Under current procedures, video programming distributors are required to make best efforts to obtain widely available certifications from video programmers. The second report and order would remove video programming distributors from this certification process and instead obligate video programmers to file their certifications directly with the Commission. This will result in having all certifications located in one place, making it easier for video programming distributors and Commission staff to locate the certifications. The item also revises the procedures for receiving, serving, and addressing television closed captioning complaints in accordance with a burden-shifting compliance model. This model requires video programming distributors to initially address complaints but allows the video programming distributor to shift the responsibility for responding to a complaint if the video programming distributor, after conducting an investigation, determines that the problem was not within its control. The second report and order also establishes a compliance ladder for the Commission's television closed captioning quality requirements. The compliance ladder provides video programming distributors and video programmers with opportunities to take informal and prompt corrective action to reduce the need for enforcement action by the Commission. Finally, the item requires each video programmer to register with the Commission its contact information for the receipt and handling of written closed captioning complaints using the Commission's web form. We believe that the actions taken in the second report and order, by clearly defining the responsibilities for the quality and provision of closed captioning and adopting other procedural reforms, will help ensure compliance with the Commission's closed captioning rules. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges.
Thank you very much to all of you and everyone in the Bureau for their efforts. Commissioner Clyburn.
Just over 19 years ago, the Commission adopted its first set of closed captioning rules. This decision marked a major first step in granting full access to video programming for deaf and hard of hearing or hearing impaired citizens. Much has changed since 1997, and today it is most fitting for us to update these rules to reflect the insights gained from the experiences by industry, advocates, and the FCC. First, this item will place the responsibility for closed captioning quality on video programming distributors as well as video programmers. Each will be held accountable both for the provisioning and the quality of closed captioning issues that are primarily within their control. A common sense update, to be sure. Video programming distributors will continue to be responsible for the provisioning of closed captioning, but now video programmers will be held responsible for the absence of those captions if they fail to provide them. This item also enhances the transparency of compliance certifications and updates compliance procedures, whether those complaints are received by the Commission or the video programming distributor. It is my hope that these updates will not only help in compliance with our closed captioning rules, but will assist in streamlining the resolution of closed captioning complaints or problems going forward. Many thanks are due for this item, and as the Bureau Chief mentioned, those names, I want to thank them, but I also, as always, would like to acknowledge and include thanks to Karen Pell-Strauss and Elliot Greenwald for such an excellent item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Earlier this month, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, and though it's been said before, a lot has changed in the past 2 decades, including the evolution of television sets away from those that were big with fake wood paneling around them to what we have today, razor-thin screens. And, of course, they're not the only game in town. We live in a world where those screens surround us and opportunities for viewing continue to multiply. All this change is terrific, but we have got to make sure that we continue to honor the values that we had 20 years ago or 19 years ago when we first put in place our new closed captioning policies. And it's important because there are an estimated 36 million Americans who are deaf or have hearing loss. And there are 40 million more over the age of 65 who experience varying degrees of hearing loss at some point in their lives. They all rely on accurate, synchronized, complete, and well-placed captions to enjoy video programming. Now, 2 years ago, we took significant steps to update our closed captioning policies. And today, we close an enforcement gap so that the FCC can step in when need be. And we also recognize that video programming distributors and programmers alike work hard to provide high-quality closed captions. We implement strict timelines for consumers' complaints to be addressed. and this is important, we implement a compliance ladder so that improvements can be made without immediate threat of enforcement. So thank you to the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, not just for the excellent work here today, but for your absolutely unyielding commitment to improving the quality of closed captioning.
Hear, hear. Mr. Pye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Video programmers and distributors each play an important role with respect to the provision and quality of closed captions. And today's order, at its core, embraces a common-sense approach to allocating responsibility for complying with the Commission's closed captioning quality rules. A distributor will be responsible for those aspects of closed caption quality over which it has primary control, and a programmer will be responsible for those aspects of closed captioning quality over which it has primary control. Of course, the devil is in the details. For example, this order establishes a compliance ladder for our closed captioning quality rules, which is designed to encourage parties to quickly address and remedy problems without involving the agency's enforcement bureau. I had concerns about language originally in the order that would have delegated vast discretion to avoid the compliance ladder and refer matters directly to the enforcement bureau. This would have defeated the entire purpose of the compliance ladder. But through some tough negotiations, we were able to significantly limit the possibility of evading the ladder. The compromise language may not be ideal, but it is good enough to merit my concurrence. Accordingly, I'm voting to approve in part and concur in part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our main focus of this item is to shift the burden involving the quality of closed captions from the programming distributors to the programmers themselves. While I can generally agree with the concept, I suspect it will be much messier and therefore punitive than what is suggested in the text. I also worry that the item doesn't make a similar shift for the burden to provide closed captions. The same logical argument for the quality shift should apply to the provisioning. In any event, I will support these provisions notwithstanding. Disappointingly, the item seeps into two troubling areas. First, the item creates an exceptionally convoluted mechanism by which a consumer closed captioning quality complaint could be forwarded from a video distributor to the programmer and then back again. Under this structure, the personal consumer information would be redacted before forwarding could occur. But during consideration of an item just last month, it was alleged that it was too difficult to redact personal information for broadcasters' correspondence files. So the chairman graciously agreed to move a separate item to eliminate the correspondence file in its entirety. How can it be that redacting personal information and the creation of a unique identifier is easy for video distributors, but not for broadcasters? Does anyone not check these items for consistency? Second, the item creates a three-tiered compliance ladder for the electronic newsroom technique procedures and then subsequently rejects it by establishing a special, and I quote, rule allowing CGB to refer a captioning quality rule violation directly to the Enforcement Bureau or for enforcement action or for the Enforcement Bureau to pursue an enforcement action on its own without first going through the compliance ladder for certain violations. Thanks to Commissioner Pye, we now have a tighter standard of intentional and deliberate. Anyone want to guess how that's going to be applied by the bureaus? Why wouldn't the compliance ladder capture such a violation? No justification is given. Instead, the item creates a fake compliance ladder that the CGB or Enforcement Bureau or both will climb over any time they want. In essence, this creates an illusion of a thoughtful and judicious regulator, but it preserves the right to throw out the window without any questions asked whenever the bureaus feel like it. No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I have a statement for the record, but in summary, this is basically about responsibility. It's the responsibility to those who hear with their eyes, and it's the responsibility of those who provide closed captioning, whether you create it or distribute it. I think the Bureau has done a great job on this, and I look forward to supporting it. So let's call for the votes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Depart.
The ayes have it. The item is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, will you please announce the item on today? Madam Chair. Madam, you got a promotion. There are days you could have this, Madam Secretary, would you please announce the consent agenda?
As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, today you will consider a consent agenda composed of the items listed under consent agenda on the Commission Sunshine Notice. For your convenience during this vote, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I've provided each of you with a copy of the Sunshine Notice.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll now go to a vote on this. For the consent agenda items listed on the Sunshine Notice, we have received no objection from any commissioner. Accordingly, I will shortly call the vote on this consent agenda. If you are voting to adopt all of the consent agenda items, please indicate by voting in favor. If you oppose the adoption of any of these items on the consent agenda, please vote to oppose, and I will call on you in turn to identify the item you are opposing by the number assigned to it on the Sunshine agenda. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of adopting the items listed on the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes, down here.
Yes, sir.
Can I have numbers 1, 2, and 3? I would like to be recorded as concurrent part and dissenting part on each item.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. The items are adopted. The consent agenda is adopted, and it is so ordered. In a moment, I want to go to the commissioners and their opportunity to make other observations. But before I turn to my colleagues, all of us lost a good friend and a bright mind, a big heart, and a good laugh when Dan Brenner was tragically killed on Monday in a pedestrian rundown accident in Los Angeles. Dan was a former member of the team here at the FCC, a senior advisor to both Commissioners Ferris and Fowler. He served for 17 years as the Chief Regulatory Counsel at NCTA. And in 2012, Governor Jerry Brown of California appointed him to the Los Angeles Superior Court, where he has sat since then in a robe. Something that those of us who knew Dan always thought was an interesting attire for a guy who was so quick-minded and so funny. He was a mentor to many in the policy community. He was a friend to us all. He was a leader in the LGBT community. And something that a lot of folks didn't know about him, he spent a lot of time teaching math in the underprivileged community. He's truly going to be missed. He was a great person, good man. And I'm sure my colleagues share this and would want to express themselves. And let me just say that we'll go down the bench, and then at the end, let's just ask for a moment of silence to remember our good friend Dan. Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, I did not know Dan well. He came in less than a handful of times to see me representing his clients, and of course with cable interest. But what I remember was a tall, lean, dapper individual with a good sense of humor and just deep knowledge of media policy. He will, of course, be missed by the bar, by those of us in the FCC family. Our hearts are heavy. Our condolences go to his family and many, many, many friends. And it's tough when a light like that is dimmed, but he will never be forgotten. His wit and his depth, again, will be replicated by, if we're smart, will be replicated and remembered by us all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner?
I did know Dan. Condolences to his family and friends. And in addition to the many things that he is known for in these parts and elsewhere, he was a terrific stand-up comic, which makes me think that it must have been a blast to be in his courtroom. And I will count it among my regrets that I never got the opportunity to see that. But again, condolences to his family and friends.
I would agree with everything that has been said. Dan was a great lawyer, a good man, and a very funny man. The first and only case I had the opportunity to argue in the D.C. Circuit was actually against Dan, very arcane inside wiring case. And I told him afterward that even though I thought we were pretty likely to win, nonetheless, if he had challenged the regulations adoption many years ago, I thought off the record you had a pretty decent chance of winning. And he said, well, now you tell me. I mean, like 5 years later, and it was just sort of, you just have to be there. It was sort of the joie de vivre that he brought to everything he did was something that's so remarkable, especially in this field, which tends to be obscure to say the least. But we thank him for his public service to the people of California and for his labors at the FCC, and we'll remember him in the years to come.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just say God bless Dan and provide comfort to his family at this time. Thank you.
So let's just take a moment to each think about our own special relationship with Dan and remember him. As everybody said, he'll be greatly missed. Mr. Clyburn, you have anything you want to add for the betterment of the body?
Yes, I was going to join you, and I don't know what sequence you wanted to do. We've got a couple of departures, so I don't know if...
Far be it from me to try and preempt you from doing anything, Commissioner, so go for it.
To the American public, this is very unusual for him to yield like this, but I really wanted to say that when it was announced that Roger Sherman was going to be the next bureau chief, I was thrilled. As acting chairman, he was the Democratic chief counsel to the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, where he provided my staff with incredible support. There are a number of wireless highlights and achievements that can be accredited to Roger's wise counsel and leadership. The AWS-3 auction, the Mobile Spectrum Holdings order that established pro-competitive spectrum reserve rules to implement, that we will implement in the incentive auction, the reform of the Part 1 competitive bidding rules. I know this is people out there, this is putting them to sleep, but it is enabling incredible opportunities for you that you probably take for granted, but these are important. But one of the things I respect the most about Roger is when we wanted to ensure that more members of the Wireless Bureau staff receive the proper credit for the contributions they made to various policy decisions, he did so. So for that and so much more, Roger, I have no idea where you are.
He's like typical,
great. And typical in the back.
You know?
We thank you so much for your service.
You have anything else?
Oh, yes. Also, thank you. I am not thinking today, so I also want to acknowledge.
You get so shook up over the thought that Roger's leaving,
I know.
It would make sense to.
And speaking of, I want to acknowledge, and I'll try to keep this not as interesting as it would normally be off camera, to Jonathan Chambers. Jonathan is here somewhere. I'm also used to him towering over me.
There he is over here.
Who has been incredible to our office and always has looked out for consumers in creative and innovative ways. He's instrumental in the video relay service reform adopted during the transition just before the chairman got here. And I just saw with him a demonstration of the ACE interoperable platform, which could unleash significant benefits while reducing the cost to the funds. You know, some of these things go under the radar, but they are extremely important and innovative. And my goodness, we thank you so much for this. His thoughtful advice on everything from, again, the VRS fund to Connect America fund to E-rate. He is an out-the-box thinker. He is out the box, but that's another thinker who challenged normal expectations and policies. And whenever I ask for, how can we do this? How can we do this again? If I was not in sync with that, he always managed and always attempted to come up with alternatives. My nickname for him, for those who know him, is Mr. Happy. If you know him, you know why. That is a joke. But I am not so happy. I am not so happy today, my friend, to see you leave this place. But I am grateful to you for all of the support that you've lent to this office and given to this agency. So the best to you always, and thank you.
Commissioner Rosenworcel?
First of all, I want to call out Wireless Bureau Chief Roger Sherman, who is sitting in the back row today like the former congressional staffer he is, dutifully trying to avoid the limelight. But the truth is, Roger was never very successful at that. He was always a go-to person here in every role I've had in policy dialogues around this town, because he is so savvy, so smart, and so knowledgeable. And rather than bid him well, I'm just going to stay in denial that he's departing. It just seems easier. Best wishes, too, to Jonathan Chambers. Finally, Circle of Life, though I'm going to bring someone in. Okay. And I want to introduce Mark Paul. Mark Paul's joining my office, taking on the role of Media Legal Advisor. Mark is an old hand. He has been at law firms Lucas Nace and also at Steptoe and Johnson. He also did some time on Capitol Hill early on, serving for his home state senator, then Senator Joe Biden. And more recently, and where I got to know him, he served as senior counsel to former senator, the deceased Senator Frank Lautenberg from New Jersey. So Mark is a terrific political mind. He is a first-rate lawyer and a friend, and I'm thrilled to have him join my office and the agency.
Wonderful. Welcome, Mark. Mr. Pai?
Just two sad notes and two bittersweet notes. First, I wanted to note that Diane Douglas recently passed away. Diane joined the FCC in April of 1985 in the Common Carrier Bureau as a clerk typist. In 1986, she moved to OMD, where she then spent the next 18 years in the finance department. In 2004, she went to CGB, first in the Reference Information Center as an information technician, and then to the Consumer Inquiries and Complaints Division. According to her supervisor, Eric Gamage, she always told me that she wanted to make sure that she had work to do. She didn't want to be sitting around with nothing to do. That was the mark she left for over 3 decades at this agency, and all of us are grateful for her work, both as a coworker and as American citizens. Secondly, I wanted to note the passing of a Supreme Court Justice, Antonin Scalia. He was obviously a giant in the history of the Supreme Court. His opinions in constitutional cases are very well known, but he also had a substantial impact on this agency. With respect to the Telecom Act, for example, he authored the 1999 opinion in AT&T versus Iowa Utilities Board, which was one of the first major cases in which the Supreme Court blessed the FCC's regulation following the 96 Act. In 2004, he authored the court's opinion in Verizon versus Trinco, which established that the purported violation of Telecom Act duties didn't necessarily state an antitrust claim, which was a pretty hot issue back then. Even recently, he authored in the administrative law area the opinion in City of Arlington versus FCC, which was critical for those of us who think about the nuances of whether agencies should have the jurisdiction to decide whether they have jurisdiction. But for me personally, my affinity for him came in law school, and I think most law students would agree with this, whether you agree with him or not in his opinions. He was a delight to read. I mean, if we were reading tons of cases, and it's just, some of them are exceptionally boring, to read a Scalia opinion, especially a dissent, was something that made you sit up and think. And for me, one of the reasons why I became an antitrust lawyer in the first place and started my career at the honors program in the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division was his 1992 dissent in a case called Kodak versus Image Technical Services. Exceedingly complex, but basically involving Section 2 duties and whether interbrand the market power should be construed to convey market power in another market. one of the great joys in my life was being able to meet a few years ago with the judge for whom I clerked in New Orleans when he was up here in Washington. And he said, we got together and he said, I've got a little surprise for you. We have another guest joining us. And I said, who's it going to be? And he said, it's going to be Justice Scalia. And I'm like, yeah, right, come on. And sure enough, the justice arrived. And to borrow from his inimitable dissent in Morrison v. Olson, the wolf came as a wolf. He was funny, he was smart, and I had the chance to tell him about that dissent in Kodak, and just without even missing a beat, he just launched into his, essentially recapping the dissent, and it was just incredible to have that conversation with him. I also asked him how it was possible for a Yankees fan to be married happily to a Red Sox fan for so many years, and he managed to bridge that divide as well. So I will certainly miss Justice Scalia and appreciate his service to our country. Next I want to echo what everyone has said about Roger and to John. Roger has just been a terrific chief of WTB. I had the chance to meet him first when he was on the Hill, and as chief here, he really was at the center of so many of the critical issues we handle. It's hard to think of anything that we've done that you haven't been able to contribute to. I especially appreciate his work on the AWS-3 aftermath, and that was one area where it was exceedingly difficult, but I appreciate Roger's good faith efforts to reach out to our office. John Chambers, what a distinguished career in public service you've had. I mean, going back all the way back to the years you spent with Senator Danforth, that illustrious member of the Senate from Missouri, all the way to here, where you've really been a leader in some of the more difficult and challenging issues that we've confronted. I want to echo what Commissioner Clyburn said with respect to your work on the video relay service proposal. This is one of those items that has languished for years across many administrations, but the fact that you took the initiative to seize it by the horns, to put it on a solid footing, and hopefully to get costs under control for the benefit of consumers and taxpayers is something that deserves everybody's plaudits, and you certainly have mine. I also think it's especially significant that you have an affinity for Kansas City sports teams. That's something I hope you continue to exhibit in the years to come. With that, I am done, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Reilly? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may do these in a slightly different order than my colleague. First, to Roger, I want to thank you for representing your bosses over the years very well. I didn't always agree with the policy outcomes or advice that you provided, but I did respect it, and I do respect it. I enjoyed my time working with you on Capitol Hill, and I've enjoyed my time working with you at the Commission, and I wish you best in your future. To Jonathan Chambers, I want to thank you for the spirited debates that we've had on a number of issues in my office. I enjoyed that hour we would have every month to kind of talk through different policy issues and think of it. And I want to thank you for your interest in saving consumers and the Commission money in the offering of disability technology. And I want to join my colleague in acknowledging the work of Justice Scalia. I only had the opportunity to meet him once, but I wish I just extend my best and say God bless. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, let's pile on Roger here. I agree entirely with Commissioner Rosenworcel. It's so typical you're hiding back there in the back, Roger. You know, so when I found that I was going to get this job, I began looking around, and knowing that we were going to raid the wireless bureau chief, Ruth Milkman, and make her chief of staff here, who could fill those rather large shoes. Now, she'll be offended by that because she has petite feet, but large shoes. And I started casting around, and Roger and I had lunch one day, and we talked about some opportunities that might exist at the Commission. And I remember when he said, yes, he was interested, and I'm going, wow, this is great news. And so, you know, when Roger came in, I mean, it was a wonderful day for this agency. I mean, we've already heard a recounting of the kind of things that he was involved in, AWS-3, you know, how we deal with this innovative approach to 3.5, updating the competitive bidding rules, how you worry about cellular service licensees and changing those rules, how you worry about making sure that infrastructure is out there for this wireless wonder to exist on. But the thing that always impressed me and that we'll miss the most about you, Roger, is that You were incredibly selfless. You were incredibly focused. And you, my friend, are a great leader who will be missed. So thank you very, very much, Roger. To John Chambers, who I'll challenge anybody up here for who's known John the longest. I think it's probably approaching 30 years that we've known each other, and he's been the head of OSP since 2013. As everybody said, he helped in the modernizing of USF, and his leadership and the issues for the disability community have been legion, have been repeated up here, and make a difference, which is about all anybody can ever ask for. John will always be grateful to you for your service, and we look forward to the next mountains that you're going to climb. Now, having talked about all these downer things, let me some good news. Fortunately, John Wilkins, our current managing director, has agreed to step into Roger's shoes and become the new chief of the Wireless Bureau. Are you here, John, or is he? Okay. So, we all know what a great job he has done as managing director. He led the charge on E-rate. He has been playing a similar role in the Lifeline reform, which we will take up shortly, when there were some early issues with regard to software and some of the functionality of the incentive auction. John stepped in, bringing his McKinsey experience and expertise to address some of those issues. He is just simply a superb manager and creative individual, and so the ability to have him step in behind Roger and pick up, because there's a few things going to be going on in the wireless. I don't know if anybody's counting, but it's 41 days until the auction starts. And it's great to have a guy like John in the Wireless Bureau, who has been involved in this process leading up. And then John leaves a void, and fortunately Mark Stevens, who has been our CFO, is stepping into to that as acting managing director. We've all grown to appreciate and respect Mark and the great skills that he brings, and so we're looking forward to him continuing that glide path that John put us on. So if there are no other things, I would request one privilege of the chair to ask the secretary where she was yesterday and to tell us about the story of that great American who happens to be your grandfather.
I had the honor and privilege of attending the premiere in New York City of Race, the incredible and true story of my grandfather, Jesse Owens, and I look forward to everyone going this weekend, opening weekend, but it truly is a wonderful movie about a wonderful man, and just very honored to be a part of that legacy, and look forward to another generation just being inspired by his story and the person that he was.
Well, it's just fabulous that story is getting told. As you know, I was privileged to know your grandfather.
Yes,
and
I do. The Buckeye Bullet.
Are you kidding? And he was a great, warm, humble man. And I look forward to seeing the movie. But I think it's fabulous that you were on the red carpet yesterday.
It's even better for my 14-year-old son.
Whoa. Okay, Madam Secretary, why don't you walk us through what happens next?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, March 31st, 2016.
And until then, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with the press conference. Before we get started, just a few reminders since there are some new faces here today. It's a large crowd, so we're going to try to stick to the one question per reporter. Also, please speak into the microphone when you ask your question so everyone can hear. If possible, please say your name and the publication you're from as well. With that, the chairman will give a brief introduction and we'll get right to your questions.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. I guess it's good afternoon now, everybody. Moments ago, the Commission approved two distinct items which share common themes. The first of these is consumer choice. Consumers essentially have no choice when it comes to picking the equipment that they use to access pay TV services. 99% of consumers access their video provider through a set-top box or application that the provider leases to them every single month, and they don't have any choice. By introducing competition into the set-top marketplace, as Congress has mandated, consumers will finally have options for how they access pay TV, and those competitive options will do what competition always does, which is drive better services, drive down costs, and create opportunities. And when it comes to video content, consumers have more choices than ever on multiple platforms. But on the most popular platform, television, there are concerns that the range of diverse programming choices are narrowing. Thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Clyburn, the Commission is taking a fresh look at the video marketplace to help ensure that TV viewers have diverse programming options as Congress has mandated. The second key theme linking today's items is removing barriers and expanding opportunities. Today's set-top box marketplace has closed standards controlled by the pay TV industry. We propose to establish open standards for set-top boxes, the same way that we have open standards for cell phones, for routers, for other devices. And we hope that by removing those barriers, innovators will step up to develop new ways for consumers to enjoy their favorite programming on their terms. On the content side, the Commission has heard time and again from independent programmers that demands made during carriage negotiations with cable providers and other MVPDs are often obstacles to reaching enough viewers to have a viable business. With today's notice of inquiry, we're taking a fresh look at the video marketplace and examining these challenges and how best to remove barriers and expand the availability of independent and diverse programming. And when we expand opportunities for innovators to innovate and let consumers choose their favorite products, programs, and services, everybody wins. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Should we pick on Monty first?
Monty Talo, Com Daily, thank you. Commissioner O'Reilly paired the set-top proposal with the effort to expand the definition of an MVPD, and he said that those are two things working hand in hand to expand the FCC's reach. Do you have any reaction to that? Is there any relationship between the set-top box proposal and the MVPD OTT thing?
No, he's wrong. Brian?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Earlier you said that the item on set-top boxes doesn't require a multi-billion-dollar re-engineering of the network, but MVPDs say the opposite, that even though the item doesn't require this, what's ultimately going to happen is that they'll have to pour money into the network to comply. So is there something that you know about networks that they don't know? What's going on there?
No, that's why I tried to show those charts today. Can we throw the charts up again? That if the charts will come up, yeah. So the devices work exactly the same way. If you look at those 4 steps of back and forth between the cable operator and the device, they are identical whether or not it is a device that you are forced to have or a device that you can choose amongst companies. Because that's just, so at first is signal goes down, says, okay, what channels are available, what numbers are they on, signal goes down, that's step 1. Step 2, signal goes down and says, what's the authorization for this box, what tiers can it look at, can it record, things like that. Signal comes back saying this is what the consumer has chosen, and then the content goes down. That's unchanged. I mean, the cable operators have Roku, for instance, as a box that some of them have blessed and used. They don't have to rebuild the networks to do that.
Is the idea here that the criticism here from the industry is that they would be required to build their networks so that they could then respond to every potential third-party device that wants to connect to the network, and that would be the costly thing to do, regardless of what the capabilities of the device were. So
that's why you have standards. You come up with, this is the way it will interface. One standard. Here's how it works, and give consumers choice.
So your hope is that the standards process, will lead to a solution that does not require expensive network engineering, re-engineering.
So let's look at how the standards process works. When Wi-Fi routers are standardized through a standard process, and you go from 802.11a to B to C to D to E to on up through all the various iterations. You don't have to rebuild the network every time you do that, and that's one of the things that is taken into consideration as you're doing the standard. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. David McCabe from The Hill. I'm looking at the next couple months, and it seems like there may be a point where you're...
I'm sorry, you're looking at what?
At the next couple months, and It seems like there may be a point where you're fighting pretty contentious battles on 3 different fronts, the set-top box item, Lifeline, and almost certainly a privacy ruling for ISPs. I'm wondering how you expect to handle the challenge of fighting on kind of 3 different fronts, and also whether you are concerned at all that might make it harder to get consensus among the 5 of you on less controversial items.
So, I think the reality comes down to the fact that there is roughly 90% of the time there's consensus among the 5 of us. All you get to see is the fun stuff. I was interested during the media coverage of Justice Scalia's death. That one of his quotes was, you'd be surprised the number of times that we agree. And I go, I identify with that. And I'd also like to associate myself with some of my colleagues today that commented on that. I too had the privilege of knowing Justice Scalia. He was a force majeure, as they say. But to your question, I think we'll be able to handle things.
And just to make it clear, is that you're talking both about that your office and your staff will be able to have the resources to fight these three different battles, and the dynamic amongst them.
I would, I'm not sure it's fight three different battles. I think it's a question of will we be able to work. Do we have the resources necessary to work the processes to try and come together with some kind of a majority consensus on the commission? I believe so. David.
Hello, Chairman. David Hatch, Policy and Regulatory Report. On another topic, the top lawmakers on the Senate Antitrust Committee just wrote the FCC warning that a merged Charter Time Warner Cable could interfere with online video distributors. Do you share that concern? And is that an issue that you want to address through conditions on the deal?
David, we're at 144 days on the shot clock.
That's why I'm asking the
if
question.
Anybody's counting, and you know that I'm not going to comment on the
Can you
details
at least comment
of
generally
that.
whether you share that general
David,
concern?
I'm not going to comment on this proceeding. I never comment on these. You know that.
Thank you.
Elena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lydia Bayud, Bloomberg BNA. Some cable representatives have said that they have no problem negotiating paid distribution arrangements with tech companies that distribute video content. And by the sounds of it, this proceeding does seem quite complex, particularly where it concerns contractual matters. How is your proposal a better method for expanding access to pay TV content?
I don't think it's going to change the contractual relationships. What I was trying to explain in my statement is that this is giving consumers choice. It is not forcing the cable operators to change the way they do business. It's simply a question of, does the signal go to a red box or a blue box? Lynn.
Lynn Stanton, TR Daily. With regard, you had mentioned briefly the privacy would not be implicated by the set-top box item, but so what does that mean? Are you contemplating imposing requirements on these third-party manufacturers or app developers, or how do you plan to get at ensuring that consumers' privacy is respected?
Good question. So the standard, to be able to license the standard, you're going to have to comply with the Title VI, Section 631 privacy rules, which apply to cable operators.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Margaret Harding McGill with Political Pro. My question is kind of looking forward to Lifeline. I wanted to ask, I guess, when you might see some action on Lifeline and specifically on the minimum service standards issue. I know that there's been concern if the standards are too high, will that lead to out-of-pocket costs for subscribers? So I wanted to see how you feel about out-of-pocket costs for Lifeline subscribers.
We're working hard with Commissioner Clyburn on this issue, and I hope we'll be able to bring it forward, and you'll know the answer to that quickly.
Hi, sir. Some people say that the government has a poor track record of trying to force innovation. What potential risks have you considered moving forward with something like this? Lindsay Borma with CBS, by the way.
So the issue here is, are consumers going to have competitive choices? Or are they going to be forced to lease a box month after month after month after month and total up, several hundred dollars a month? And there will be innovative solutions to that. It's just like when the telephone company used to say, you have to lease my phone. The only phone that'll work on the telephone network is my phone. And this agency said, no, we're going to open that up. And what happened? The functionality of phones went up and the prices went down. That's the kind of thing that happens when you open things up to consumer choice, to competition and innovation.
Well, what do you say to people who think the marketplace should just speak for itself?
There is no marketplace today. 99% of consumers have no choice. That is not a marketplace.
Thank you.
I'm tempted to ask about the mandated colors of these boxes, but I think I'll wait on that. How can you assure the content industry that unlocking the box isn't going to unlock their security and licensing protections for their content?
So today, they are content, they're happy with the security that happens when they deliver to a Roku box. They're happy with security that delivers to an iPad. They're happy with security that delivers to an Android device. Same story.
Questions over here? Will, we'll give you the microphone.
Hi, I'm Janet Adkison with RFD TV. Regarding the NOI that was approved, can we expect the FCC to develop a rule helping independent programmers before the current administration comes to an end? And if not, what's the likelihood that new leadership would even continue the effort or abandon altogether?
Oh, golly, I have no idea what happens, can you tell me who's going to win the next election?
I was hoping you could.
And we're going to move forward on the NOI, and that will inform next steps.
And has a timeline been established for the comment period and when the next steps take place?
Yes, I think we've got 30 on that. Is what it is. I'm looking for my signals. Yes, okay. 30 days for comments and then reply comments after that.
Thank you.
Hi, Amir Nasser, Morning Consult. I was curious about a couple of your colleagues mentioned what Commissioner Pai specifically about eliminating the box as opposed to unlocking. Mm-hmm. I was just curious about your thoughts on why you believe this path forward is better than eliminating the box altogether.
I'm all for eliminating the box. I tried to make that clear in the statement. We are moving towards an apps economy. The only difference between an app and a piece of hardware is moving from hardware to software. It's the same exact functionality. What's important is, do consumers have a choice? And right now, whether it's a box or an app, they don't have choice. Now, things get simplified in terms of, throw around, we're talking about boxes. No, we're talking about, I tried to be clear in my statement, we're talking about boxes and apps. And the issue is they should both be open and consumers should have choice in either.
Any other questions over here?
Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. On the NOI, like Commissioner O'Reilly pointed out, this is an issue that's come up a number of times with the FCC in the past. Do you see any kind of possible areas where the FCC could make regulatory differences in this marketplace? What sorts of hypotheticals could the FCC look at?
Matt, we just published the NOI and you're asking me for its conclusions?
It's been like 20 minutes.
Come on.
I want to know if you have some calendar in your office or at home where it says every day 144 days on the charter time clock, 41 days till the Spectrum auction starts, or whatever the dates were.
The answer is that fortunately for the Spectrum auction, the math is simple. It's the 29th, okay? And there are 29 days in this month, and so you just kind of start counting back from that. So I can
Not bad.
actually do it in my head.
Very nice. Okay, I do have a real question, I promise. I would love to get a little bit inside the mind of Tom Wheeler. You spoke, I know, right? Scary. You spoke at length today about the set-top box proposal before the vote, something that you've done in the past, but not a ton. I saw you mentioned that you were disappointed in the stances from the Republicans. I saw you shake your head a few times. Given that this could have been just sort of a wonky proceeding to come out of a wonkier bill. To be frank, you seem relatively frustrated with how this has all played out and a lot of the flack that you've gotten. Tell me how you feel.
No, I think you're reading things, and this is a simple question. We're trying to provide the choice for consumers that was mandated by Congress. Was I disappointed that folks didn't even want to ask the question? Sure I was. I mean, the purpose of a notice of proposed rulemaking is to say, let's build a record and then make a decision on that record. And when you say, no, I've already made up my mind, I don't even want to build a record, I guess I didn't know I was shaking my head, but I think that's probably cause for shaking your head.
Hi, Chairman. Ryan Barber from the National Law Journal.
Hey,
you invoked Section 629 today, the Communications Act. You put it up on the projector screen. Before your comments, Commissioner O'Reilly was talking about that section and how it really refers to equipment. And, he drew a very clear distinction between, the intent of that law applying to equipment and not, the software, the apps that you're talking about. How much of a concern is that for you as we enter this rulemaking stage? And is this anything that's tripped up the commission in the past in any kind of proposals?
So the statute talks about equipment, systems, and services. I think that covers apps and everything else.
Other questions on this side of the room?
Well, good.
Could I ask another one?
Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah, hi, John Brodkin, Ars Technica. I want to ask about the issue of advertising in third-party set-top boxes, and you said nothing will change that. So what exactly prevents a third-party set-top box maker from putting advertising in? Is there something in the NPRM that does that? Is there an existing law that they would be breaking? And is it any different from cable card? Is there any rule preventing, TiVo or another cable card user from inserting ads right now?
It's a good question, John. The rule will prohibit it. You need to have the sanctity of the content. Nobody's going to insert ads into it. Nobody's going to make a split screen where they're putting ads next to it. Nobody's going to say there's a frame around it where you can say, go to Joe's Auto Repair. It's going to require the sanctity of the content be passed through unchanged.
Does that include like the neighborhooding agreements too, or?
Those are programming agreements are included in this, and in the programming agreements are part of the sanctity of the concept. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is in that first data stream that comes out is what channel it goes on, and that's still there.
So the rule will specifically prohibit extra advertising then?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have the bureaus are here for questions from the bureaus. Are there questions today for the Media Bureau on any items? Yes. Okay.
Bill? Hi, Bill Lake. Happy to take your questions.
No, I got one. I was wondering if you can tell us the length of the comment period for the set-top box NPR.
30 and 60. 30 days for comments, 60 days for replies.
You mentioned when you were presenting the set-top box item that you said something like, if an MPVD offers an application, they will also be required to open up the stream to application developers. And I wanted to just be clear. Are they required to open up those three core information streams to application developers, regardless of whether or not they personally offer an application to access their video content?
Yes, what that was referring to is a parity rule.
Okay.
There's the basic requirement to provide the three information flows. And then what we've proposed is that if an MVPD provides service through an app without any need for a MVP-provided piece of equipment, they have to provide the information in a way that will enable someone else to write an app that also won't require a piece of MVP equipment. So it's a matter of making sure that an app developed by an independent app developer will provide service on an equal basis to one that's offered by the MVPD.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify that if they don't have an app of their own, they don't have to provide access to app developers.
They do have to provide the three information flows, and this goes to the question of whether we're requiring a box that be provided by the MVPD. We are not. An MVPD may choose to implement these requirements in a way that requires a device, but that's up to the MVPD. They can also do it entirely in the software or in the cloud. And what we're saying is that if they do choose to provide service through an app without a piece of equipment provided, they have to make that capability also available to competitive manufacturers.
Is this on? Can you provide a sense of when the item will be out and also more details on the 2-year adoption period that was discussed?
So what was the second part?
More details on the 2-year adoption period.
Yes, the item, we hope that the NPRM will be released today. If not tomorrow, but certainly our goal is to get it out today. And what we've acknowledged is that there is a certain amount of standards development activity that needs to be undertaken by the industry in order to provide all the standards that are necessary to implement this. And we think that 2 years is an ample time for that, so we've indicated that we'll expect MVPDs to comply within that 2-year period.
If an MVPD can make their content available via the open standard by using another piece of equipment, if they so choose, aren't all the paid TV providers who we know don't like this proposal going to choose to do that, thereby effectively mandating a second box and making it the whole point of saving money or anything less effective? I mean, is there anything that the commission can do or that the NPRM does that sort of promotes doing this in a simpler way rather than allowing the companies to use a second box?
Yes, we have not prescribed a specific technical standard that must be used. What we've said is that these information flows have to be provided in a standard that's openly and publicly available. Mm-hmm. We hope and expect that standards development process will facilitate a boxless world rather than insisting on a box. And as I've mentioned, we have proposed a parity rule so that if they do provide apps that can be used without a piece of MVPD supplied equipment, they have to enable the competitors to do the same.
Sure. And then just one quick other one. You're talking about the open standards. I think the chairman mentioned, maybe he misspoke a second. He said he at some point, I think he was answering Monty's question, he said one standard, but am I right that it could be any published open standard?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Is there anything in the proposal that defines a device in a way that would include or preclude a native app on a tablet or phone being considered a device if it's native to the...
Nothing, no.
Nothing going either way?
Well, no, we contemplate that this will not lock people into hardware or software, but that the solutions can be either hardware or software running on hardware.
Oh, no, what I was getting at, though, was in terms of the parity requirement. If there were a tablet manufacturer or a phone manufacturer that included a native app that for the MVPDs, MVPDs thought, everybody's watching on their tablets, I want to get in on that. Would that then bring them under the parity requirement?
Yes. Yes. If that would be an app that's approved or developed by the MVPD, and if they're offering that, then they would have to allow competitors also to offer an app that doesn't require hardware.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, Comcast has said that approving this regulation would make consumer costs go up, would make security weaken, would erode privacy. What do you say to consumers to kind of ease that?
Competition usually doesn't make costs go up. It usually makes costs go down. We think that will be the case here. And as to privacy, as the chairman indicated, we've proposed that these device manufacturers will have to respect the same privacy standards that Title VI MVPDs have to.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Lake. Todd Shields with Bloomberg News. Could you elaborate a bit on what the proposal says about neighborhooding? I know cable companies spend a lot of negotiating time and money setting sports channels in one place, movies in another, the big networks in another. What's it say about keeping those lineups intact?
What we've said is that competitors should be allowed to offer a competitive user interface, which would include, for example, one of the things that consumers have said they really want is an integrated search capability. That's something that you can get on a TiVo cable card box today. So I think what you need to do is sort of look at how things are developed with TiVos under the cable card regime, and what we're trying to do is to provide something that in an IP world will enable the same kind of innovation to occur more generally.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the TiVo example is. Could you explain that a little bit? I've never touched a TiVo or looked at it.
What they do provide is the ability to do an integrated search across content from various sources, and that's something that we know that the CE manufacturers very much want to provide because it's something that consumers have said that they want. So there can be the cable channel lineup, but also the ability to search for a particular program and find that it's available on cable, it's available on this over-the-top service, it's available on that over-the-top service, and get those results all in one place.
You can type in basketball and it would show you.
Right.
On cable,
Yeah.
what's out on the web.
Right.
Ryan Fung with the Washington Post. A few minutes ago, the chairman said that in order to license the technology or the standard, device makers will have to abide by Title VI rules, and the industry says that Title VI only applies to MVPDs and not to other parties. Can you sort of explain how the proposal addresses that?
The proposal includes a licensing proposal under which the MVPDs would be required to provide these information flows only if the entity that they're providing information flows to, the device manufacturer, agrees to comply with various requirements. And what we've proposed is that one of those requirements will be that they abide by the same privacy standards as Title VI carriers.
Will those be enforced if there is some sort of violation?
We've raised questions about the enforcement regime. These would be binding commitments. One result would be that the MVPD doesn't have to provide the information flows to someone who won't abide by those requirements.
Yes. I have a follow-up, and then I have a different question, so if you want to go first. Then how is it that MVPDs will be able to verify that these companies are abiding by the Title VI rules? Will they be able to go in and look, or will the manufacturer certify to the FCC or to another body?
Do we provide? Yeah. We ask about that. Yeah, and we'll be interested to get input on that.
Do you make any recommendations?
Our intention is that the same privacy standards will apply in this unlock the box environment that apply to the MVPDs. We propose to do that through a licensing regime, and we ask questions about exactly what the enforcement mechanism should be.
Standards. Does the NPRM propose that you wouldn't recognize a standard with the licensing of which did not include this Title VI privacy? Is that? I'm just kind of trying to figure out how the FCC gets to be in the position of requiring these commitments because they don't license this.
Yes, we have authority over the MVPDs, and what we've proposed is to require them to make these three information flows available to competitive innovators, but to limit that requirement, in fact, to forbid them to provide the information to innovators who won't agree to these various restrictions.
Thank you.
Okay, well, just a couple more.
I just have one more, which is the chairman just said that certain types of advertising, so like frames around video content or side-by-side advertising would not be allowed, or you recommend that they not be allowed under the rules. And I'm wondering if you can walk us through how specifically your recommendation works. Is it a general standard? Is it explicitly banning certain types of?
You'll see that question is teed up in the item.
But there are no recommendations made on it?
Not as to how that would be implemented, no.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bill. There's one. I'm sorry.
Thomson Reuters. So the chairman kept describing this as an information gathering period. So trying to figure out what exactly is that? What exactly does that entail? What exactly does that look like? What's the time? I guess the timeline to move beyond that.
You're referring to the NOI on programming?
No, we're talking about the set-top box.
Well, as to the set-top box, what it is that notice of proposed rulemaking. We have proposed rules. We have a comment period and a reply comment period on that, and then the next step in a rulemaking proceeding would likely be the development of an order based on the record that we'll develop. Sorry.
That's the 30-day. Is that what you referred to earlier as like the 30-day comment period, and then?
Yeah, it's 30 days and then another 30 days. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau item? Okay, and then finally on the Enforcement Bureau items. All right, I think we are. Yes, I'm sorry.
items?
Don't know. Let's see. Is anybody here from the Enforcement Bureau? Then I'll get back to you. Okay. All right. I think Commissioners Pai and O'Reilly are here.
Hello, Cleveland.
Monty, you want to lead off?
Yeah, the chairman told me that the MVPD OTT thing and the set-top box proceeding are not related at all, and that you are wrong about them being two sides of the same plan. Do you have any reaction to that? Why do you think they're connected?
Well, I think I outlined in my statement why I think they're connected at length. I think 2.5 pages. I think it ties the two together very nicely. I think you see where you're talking to Bill Lake about the licensing piece and how that burden is going to apply onto an app provider. But I did, since the chairman was talking about facts and being right and wrong, I thought I would highlight one because I pulled out the law itself. I got the old statute, and he had mentioned the question was over here, I think, regarding devices, and it also covers systems and some other thing I think he said. And I actually highlighted the language for you. I thought I'd share it. It says, of converter boxes, interactive communications equipment, and other equipment used by consumers to access multi-channel video programming and other services offered over multi-channel video programming systems. Oh, he used systems, that's right. Systems. But it says the equipment, devices, equipment, converter boxes, not applications.
Matter that, those applications weren't really contemplated then?
Yeah, because I actually happened to be there, and that was actually my old boss's provision. We didn't contemplate an application world where you wouldn't need a set-top box. But as my colleague and I actually have highlighted in our statements, we believe there shouldn't be a need for a box. We should eliminate all the boxes. And I don't know if that's something we go to Congress and talk about, or I'm happy to talk to the Congress about, or it's something we talk to the industry about, eliminating boxes altogether. You talk about saving money. That's a better opportunity than the world we're talking heading in this path.
Earlier I asked a question to the chairman about network reengineering and the idea of a second box that MVPDs might require a second box to be installed in your home in addition to a third-party box. I guess, it seems like from what he's thinking that he hopes the standards process will produce some outcome that will be relatively costless for MVPDs. Do you see any kind of solution coming out of that process that could address that?
Hey, look, I'm hopeful for Middle East peace as well, but the notion that we would delegate to all the parties in the Middle East, okay, we're going to have an open standards body where Jordan, Syria, Israel, et cetera, have to get together and come up in a couple of years with a consensus model is just not likely to happen. And the same thing is true here. That's part of the reason why I suggested that you just simply can't say, okay, we expect a mandate to issue from this on the basis of consensus, and you just can't do that by government fiat.
Are consumers going to be able to tell the difference between, the FCC forcing cable companies to force consumers to have another set-top box versus the cable company forcing consumers to have another set-top box?
I'm not sure what the consumer is going to whom the consumer is going to attribute the existence of the second box, but the whole point is, as Commissioner O'Reilly has pointed out, and I have as well, what consumers actually want is to just eliminate the box altogether, and I think it's telling that the majority relies on this marketing slogan of unlock the box, which is just a backward-looking view of where the video marketplace is going. We would much rather have an app-based video economy, one which is much better suited, I think, to the modern consumer, and one that's much cheaper for the consumer, as opposed to just having a second box, which is inevitably where I think the majority's proposal is going to lead. I think it's also telling, by the way, that, remember, this is one of the two proposals that the DSTAC, the Downloadable Security Technology Advisory Committee, recommended. The other was a more app-based approach. So one of the things that we suggested was, look, what if this document simply sought comment neutrally on each of those proposals? Let's let the American public have input. But no, the majority was hell-bent on one proposal to the exclusion of the other. And in fact, if you look This is one of the reasons why I wish documents were published before we actually voted on them, because if you were able to look through the dozens of pages, you would find 3 paragraphs where the FCC tees up in highly slanted fashion the other proposals from the D-stack. And it's sort of the way it seeks comment is essentially in the mold of, we seek comment on why this proposal is so terrible. We seek comment on why this proposal would harm consumers. We seek comment on why we don't have legal authority to do this. And that's not the way, I think, to really tee up in a fair and full way the issues that the D-stack wrestled with, which are really complicated issues, as Commissioner Rosenworcel pointed out.
Can I just jump on to your point? There is no industry-setting body that we're talking about. It's fiction that we're going to just send it to somebody and that they're going to deal with it. It doesn't exist today. So I don't know who they think they're going to get consensus from. I think my colleague highlighted the Middle East example. But we don't have an entity that we're sending this to. We're trusting that something's going to develop for consideration. So to your second part of your question is how, the costs and some of the network costs. We're talking years before this would actually happen. I'm pretty confident this will fall apart before we got to that point.
I'd like to dig down a little bit on the nature of your opposition to this, particularly to the portion of this that would open up the MPVD video streams to app developers, which it seems the commission is saying, or the chairman is saying, would have the effect of ultimately eliminating the box. So can you get a little closer on what the daylight is, right? You say we want the commission to encourage the app development ecosystem. Why you don't think that portion of the item is good enough to do that?
Look, as I said in my statement, there are a number of different objections. First and foremost, the item places heavy reliance on this open standards body to come up with some kind of consensus solution that would enable this open platform. And the entire point I've made is that, look, what in the past gives you any confidence that in the future this particular herd of cats is going to be herded? I mean, it's very difficult to see how that's going to happen. Secondly is an issue of timing. Under the notice's own approach, it's going to be 2 years at the very least before this takes effect. In the meantime, there's going to be rapid innovation in this marketplace that we can't even conceive of right now. And I could easily imagine, for example, my Amazon Echo being the navigation device that I use to access video content of my choice. I mean, simply a matter of time. You can now order an Uber and a Domino's pizza from it. I think 2 years from now, it's entirely plausible to see that as a video navigation device. And thirdly, I think if you look at how this proposal is likely to develop, MVPDs are going to face one of 2 choices, as I pointed out. Either, number one, they reconfigure their network architecture so that anybody can access it, right? Or they put out another box that meets the specifications that this theoretical open standards body consensus comes up with. Now, what we've heard from the MVPDs is that the second path, while suboptimal, is nonetheless much cheaper than re-engineering its network architecture. So then you would have consumers having the choice, I suppose, but having the choice of unwanted hardware that simply doubles down on the mistaken approach from 1996. And that I don't think is the right way to go. Other than that, though, there might be some
other than that, it's wonderful. I just disagree with the chairman's assessment that he's supporting eliminating of the box. I think you haven't had the benefit of the item. I have pushed for months that you all should have this item. I think you will find, and the question was asked before, how does the chairman was disappointed that we didn't vote, shook his head, was disappointed that we didn't support his item. My colleague highlighted how forward how the item goes about, and there are tentative conclusions throughout. And it's not about just asking a question. It is about slanting the piece to the direction that they want it to go. He's got that right to do it, but he can't be surprised that we're not going to agree with him slanting the direction. It's the same issue we had on the NOI, I had, and my colleague had. We were able to get to a point that was more middle ground, and that was just actually more neutral, and we were willing, I got to a concurrence place. So I disagree with his analysis on what he says has happening in the item in and of itself. And 2, I disagree that he thinks it's happening, that he's eliminating the box. In the application world that exists today, you can go directly to the programmer and get content. You don't have to go if you don't want to. There are some programming that you have to have certain relationships, but most programming is not tied to the exact to the cable subscription. So you have an option in that regard. That world is developing before our very eyes, and I don't want to shut that world down by going back to a provision that was based on a hardware structure. And so it gets to the second point, which is why else do I disagree? Statutory problem. I highlighted how this is about equipment. We're going to an application world where we don't have that authority.
you guys cited what the MPPDs are telling you as you reach your decision. The chairman is seeming to make the point, or arguing that the MPPDs were saying something else several years ago and more supportive of an item like this. And I'm wondering what you make of those letters they've shown and the statements by Brian Roberts that have been cited in some pieces, and whether that factored into the way you approach those meetings with the MPPDs.
Speaking for myself, I tend to make judgments based on the facts on the ground now, not letters that were submitted 6 years ago when the video marketplace looked dramatically different. And I think if you look at the contemporaneous statements from not just MVPDs, but from the content community, from minority programmers, from Democrats on the Hill, I mean, it's this sort of rising tide of opposition, which is remarkable for its political and its technological breadth. And I think that's something that the majority simply ignored.
I would agree with my colleague's point. 6 years is an awful long time. But two, I make my decisions based on not only ex partes that are put, and the meetings that I have, but also on the breadth of the information. And I, analyze all of that and come to my decision. So whether a particular industry group has a viewpoint, that's, one factor. There's lots of factors that go in my decision, not just theirs.
David? Commissioners, what sorts of companies do you see this as helping the most? Do you see it as beneficial to Google and Amazon and Apple and Netflix at the expense of, say, Comcast, AT&T, and other video incumbents?
I have heard that argument. I can't say that one way or the other.
I have no idea, but I think it's consistently been our view that the government shouldn't be picking winners and losers, and so I would hope that there wouldn't be any motivation along those grounds.
But if I could just follow up, isn't this really a proposal that goes well beyond set-top boxes and is designed to encourage competition in the marketplace? And to the extent that it would do that, wouldn't it elevate the Googles of the world at the expense of incumbent players?
Look, I think it's critical not to accept this false framing of the issue. It's not encouraging competition in the marketplace. The entire reason we are here is because of a regulatory framework that has created a non-competitive marketplace. As I said in my statement, and I think Commissioner O'Reilly pointed out as well, we've had 20 years now of highly intrusive FCC regulation of this marketplace with the integration ban as well as the cable card regime. We've had anything but a free market competitive approach to this marketplace, and that's part of the reason why we would prefer, I think, just getting rid of the box and allowing an app-based economy to flourish, free from these sort of technological mandates that simply aren't going to serve the consumer very well.
I have an unrelated question for you both. Commissioner O'Reilly, a few weeks ago you spoke at the New American Foundation on the allocation of the 5.9 gigahertz band. You said that auto manufacturers should only keep spectrum that NHTSA determines is necessary for safety of life applications. That seems to imply that the majority of that spectrum allocation should in fact be freed up, taken away from a specific allocation, freed up for sharing. Can you confirm or clarify that? And then
Sure.
For Commissioner Pai, I'd be curious on your comment on that thought.
Sure. So I'll clarify, and I'm happy to pull down my statement, but I don't think I said that NHTSA would verify or certify. I didn't tie it to NHTSA in any regard. But my point is not that I want to take spectrum from them. It is that the spectrum that they use should be for safety purposes. So I don't want the spectrum used for parking spots and a host of other things that have been contemplated by many different folks, including the New America had in their report on different purposes that it could be used for. I'm not trying to take spectrum from them. I want the spectrum that's allocated for safety purposes that should be used for safety purposes.
I generally agree with that approach. I would just say with respect to what spectrum, your second question was what spectrum they should have?
No, I had asked whether your comments, Commissioner O'Reilly, implied that the remainder of the spectrum that is not used for safety of life applications should be freed up from control of the auto industry for spectrum sharing.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Well, we have competing proposals before the Commission on how to move forward on 5.9. I think commissioners are considering which that they like better, what do they think is most appropriate, and we'll hopefully be able to work through that in the coming months as we move to testing that will be overseen by the Commission. So we'll get a better feel for that. There's the two different ideas, whether you do a listen before talk or whether you segregate the band out. My purpose was in making the comments was that I want this band, this is a very valuable spectrum because it's probably the best opportunity we're going to have to expand unlicensed use in Wi-Fi, giving its proximity to the lower and mid-band at 5 gigahertz. So in that purpose, I want the spectrum that if the car industry is going to use it for safety purposes, that it be used actually for safety and not things that commercial purposes that can be done through other agreements.
Lynn Stanton, did you want to?
Oh, no, I just wanted to add, we're actively considering, as Commissioner Riley's office as well, the Cisco and Qualcomm proposals. And so whether it's listen before talk or segregation of the band, I think, remains yet to be determined. But I'm hopeful that we can get movement on this soon. It's now been going on 4 years since Congress passed the Spectrum Act, which teed up 5 gigahertz as a possibility for the next generation of Wi-Fi. Sorry.
That's okay. Lynn Stanton, TR Daily. I feel pretty confident that I understand that you don't like the set-top box NPRM. I'm a little confused as to what you think the FCC should be doing in light of the fact that there is a mandate it's 629, right? And as you pointed out, the mandate refers to equipment and devices and boxes and hardware type things. And yet you want the box to go away and be replaced by an app. What should the Commission do with this Section 629 mandate? Just ignore it? Ignore what Congress is telling it to do? Or?
No, I will not ignore the provision. There are provisions in the statute that do become dated over time. And in here, if we're talking about application role, which I don't think is covered by the statute, then I think that provision doesn't apply. And so then the question becomes, what's the best avenue? And I indicated earlier, I think we should, it started from a DSTAC provision in Stellar that asked for recommendations. It didn't have the next piece. The Congress did not agree that the Commission, and mandate a requirement for the Commission to do anything on this. They just said provide recommendations, and that was accomplished. So the Congress can consider what's best to do, and I would leave it in their capable hands. If there are things that we can provide advice to them on how this market is changing, I'm happy to participate in that. I think there's value in that. But I'm not going to supersede their role.
I would agree with that. And I think it highlights, actually, one of the approaches that Justice Scalia used to take on the Supreme Court, which is to say, look, if you think that the law is outmoded, then the solution is not to force regulatory change through an administrative agency. Obviously, he would have said the Supreme Court. It's to go back to Congress to get them to update the law. And strictly speaking, if you look at the text of 629, it says the FCC shall adopt regulations to assure the commercial availability of certain devices. Well, we do have regulations on the books right now. This notion that the majority is suddenly finding a strict constructionist approach to this statute. I wish they would only embrace it in other areas as well. And they say, well, our hands are tied. The statute says we have to have these regulations. It's completely wrong. I mean, we do have regulations now. Those regulations have not solved the problem. In fact, they've only made the problem worse. And so what we are saying is, why don't we simply encourage the development of this second DSTAC proposal, this app-based approach that would be much better, would reduce costs for consumers, wouldn't embroil the FCC in trying to herd cats for a number of years, and ultimately isn't going to satisfy the purposes of the original statute.
Hi, Margaret Harding McGill. I'm with Political Pro now. My question is for Commissioner O'Reilly. I wanted to hear a little bit more about what your concerns were with the notice of inquiry on the independent programmers issue. I mean, I think you mentioned that it looked like it was a regulatory push. I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit in terms of regulations.
I think you got a chance to read my statement in whole. What I said was that the item as presented certainly had a tilt to it and a direction that they sought, the authors sought. I think that my colleague and I had very good effect in trying to bring language to make it more neutral and therefore get to basic questions that will hopefully facilitate some type of record at some point, whether some action should be taken or no action should be taken. But I was highlighting throughout my statement that it's not, the point was made, this is beginning a conversation. And a couple of my colleagues said, we're starting a conversation. And the truth is, this conversation has been going on for decades. This is not a new conversation. And I highlighted 5 or 6 different examples of many where we've already looked at this issue. Congress has looked at this issue. It's been tied into merger conditions in a number of different settings. So it's not something that's new. We're going to continue to have this conversation going forward. And I was getting to that point, and yet my colleagues wouldn't take a simple modification to that language and say we seek information instead of beginning a conversation that began before I was working on these issues.
Hi, Jim Puzangaro with the LA Times. Set-top box rentals bring in a lot of revenue to the MVPDs. Absent some FCC rulemaking, what would be the motivation for them to step away from that? And you could argue that some of these trials that have just been rolled out might just be motivated by the fact that the FCC is considering rules in this area. What would their motivation be to move away from a highly lucrative rental situation right now?
Well, I think part of the motivation is that it's technically difficult and expensive to maintain these boxes. I mean, hardware is not a growth industry for most companies. I mean, they would much rather move that functionality to an app-based platform, especially in an IP world where you can accomplish for a fraction of the cost what the set-top boxes do. And so, obviously their efforts, I think, predate any suggestion that the FCC might have made in this notice by a number of years. I mean, it's been a couple of years now since we've seen the flourishing of apps, and so I don't think they're doing it simply as a hedge against future regulatory action. I think they're doing it because it's simply good for the business and serendipitously good for a number of consumers. And I just think about how I consume video now all the time. I mean, I can use a Crackle app, or I go to Vine and watch different short clips. Issa Rae, who I mentioned in my statement, I watched her on her own website. I mean, there's so many different ways to get content now that this conversation just smacks of 1996 as opposed to 2016.
I would agree with what my colleague said, and I would add to it. A number of the cable companies have been testing no boxes for quite a bit of time. I remember at the cable show last year or 2 years ago that they were looking at, it was significant companies that were trying to figure out, is this the direction we should go? What are the technical issues that we need to deal with? And that's a thoughtful conversation to have. It had nothing to do with what we adopted today. They're trying to move to that universe for multiple different reasons. The number of financial industry analysts have argued that they're already trying to get rid of the box industry on their balance sheets going forward. So it's not something that's just we created up here, my colleague and I. It is something that has been talked about for quite a bit of time, and the activity of today will just stunt that problem.
Alex?
So I'm certainly not what you guys talk about here. What the fuck is it doing?
Sound like it was coming through.
They're speaking.
I don't know. That was weird.
Companies I talked about a few weeks ago, their message was generally, we're following what the FCC is doing, and we'd be, interested in participating, et cetera. Again, paraphrasing there. But you guys seem like really think it's high likelihood that the standards thing won't work out. But it seems like there's something there that we could work with. What am I missing there?
I think this is a good example of what my former administrative law professor, Cass Sunstein, used to call an incompletely theorized agreement. If you start at 60,000 feet and you say, wouldn't it be great if we had a standards body where we could reach technical consensus? Everybody's going to say, yeah, that would be great. Let's get involved in that conversation. When it comes time to put pen to paper a year from now, 2 years from now, and you have to have these highly technical and specific decisions made, that I think is where the rubber is going to meet the road. And I think that's where the tenor of the conversation we've seen leading up to this notice is really going to be brought to bear. I mean, if you think that these highly disparate actors with highly disparate interests are going to sit in a room and come to a consensus, great. I mean, the DSTAC's results suggest that's not going to be the case. But if you do think that, then the notice is tailor-made for you. But I think if you have a view based on the reality of the situation, it's highly unlikely that's going to happen.
Two parts. One, none of the entities had an opportunity to read what the commission has put forward, so I'd be interested in their thoughts after the fact. But I agree with my colleague just said. We're talking about a universe that's much different envisioned than what people have been talking about. If you read the DSTAC report, it's a good inch and a half thick. You're not going to see this kumbaya moment where industry is in agreement. You're seeing a very fractured, very combative discussion that's going to, that will take years. And so I just disagree with the idea that it's going to be simple, that the industry body would, magically come together and find the solution.
If I could just add a plug for Commissioner O'Reilly. He's long been leading the charge for the public release of these proposals well before, at least 3 weeks before we vote on them. And I think this notice is a good example of why. I mean, a lot of these foundational questions wouldn't have to be asked if you yourself could see it before we voted on it. And I think all the questioning about the insertion or the removal of advertising is a great case in point. There is nothing in this document that prevents a third-party manufacturer from removing the ad from a programming stream or layering over another ad on another part of the screen. There's nothing in there. I mean, I've read it. Commissioner O'Reilly's read it. We are telling you this is the case. But the best way to prove us wrong would be to release the document. And until then, we're simply having battles of talking points up here. There's no way to resolve it. So I just wish that we would embrace the openness and transparency in this agency as the American people would expect us to.
Not to dwell too much on this section 629, but when we talk about this question over equipment versus software, I want to just make sure I'm understanding the upshot of this. I mean, Commissioner O'Reilly, are you going so far as to say that the FCC is not within its statutory authority here, or are you just using this argument to say it's a misguided effort?
So it's an NPRM. It asks the question, what statutory authority do we have? They have a vision of where they want to go in the app world. I'm arguing the statute doesn't provide that for the language that's actually been provided. For the experience I have working on this provision 20 years and a month ago, I guess February 8th, so maybe a little less than a month. So I was there, worked on this. My boss was the lead author of this provision in the 96 Act. So I'm pretty familiar with that we weren't thinking about an app universe when the words were used. And we talked about converter boxes, equipment. Is not an application structure. So they may ask the question, do we have authority to go in this direction? But they have a tentative conclusion they want to go in this direction and capture all of the application discussion, which I think is extremely problematic.
And actually, before Commissioner Parr, you briefly weighed in on this a little bit ago, but just wanted to, if you could just sort of maybe elaborate on where you stand here in terms of the reading of 629.
I defer to my colleague on that. Obviously, he was well-versed in the legislative history, having worked on it. But my point was simply the notion that 629 is this affirmative mandate that in 2016 we have to adopt these highly intrusive regulations to cover every aspect of this marketplace is simply mistaken. I don't think there's some affirmative mandate that the FCC has to act. If it were otherwise the case, then we would have been in breach of that statutory obligation for almost 2 decades.
Your skepticism about the ability of the stakeholders to come together and find a solution in the standards process, and considering the fact that the chairman seems to view this 2-year adoption period as a kind of way to put a backstop on his proposal, in your view, what happens at the end of that 2 years if there's no consensus? What do you anticipate the commission will do? Do you expect some kind of technological mandate eventually to come down, or what is the alternative?
I mean, other than a few sad emojis on Twitter from the FCC, I'm not sure what the result is going to be if the consensus body doesn't reach a consensus. I mean, everything depends on that, and so sort of the sine qua non of this entire proceeding. So I'm not sure what, if anything, the FCC would do if in a couple of years there isn't a solution on the table.
I would only respond and say in 2 years I imagine a different shaped commission, so they may have a different reaction to any type of agreement that's probably not going to be reached.
So if the FCC didn't do anything in this proceeding that was launched today, and as you say, the MPPDs are all of their own accord moving towards an app-based environment because they don't want to have these boxes on their books, that these boxes they're making $8 per subscriber per month.
I didn't give the impression that everyone was.
Okay.
So I just
but anyway, so what then is your vision of what would, and obviously you're not making the business decisions for the MPPDs, but as a consumer, I'm sort of picturing I end up paying $8 a month for an app to be, with no choice of getting a different app to perform the same function, because it's not like there's a lot of different navigational maps that I could put onto my tablet. There's only one app that's going to get me the content that I'm already paying for from my MVPD. And so is that a good outcome? Or do you don't think that's a likely outcome? Am I too pessimistic and it's just going to be MVPDs giving away apps for free and the world will be nice?
I mean, it's always what did Yoda say? It's always difficult to predict the future. It's it's hard to say where things are going to be in a couple of years, but I think we're evolving to a place where consumers will be able to get rid of the set-top box and use apps almost exclusively to access video content. And whether it's an MVPD proprietary app or a third-party app, I mean, I mentioned Crackle, for example. I mean, a lot of consumers have simply cut the cord and use apps like that to access video content that they want. And so I don't think it's a choice of saying, well, either consumers are going to be locked into this set-top box purgatory forever, or we're going to have this grand slew of competition with third-party set-top box manufacturer products flooding homes. I think there's going to be an app-based economy that will take over. And what the shape of it is, I don't know, but leave that to wiser minds.
Well, two parts. The chairman had said that some indicated or alluded to the fact that some cable companies may be renting the apps today that someone is paying, and I'm not aware of that occurring. That most of them are given away. They're available on the operating systems, and so I'm not aware of anyone charging for apps today. But I also was describing a universe which I'm not predicting. I don't want to get into that game, but I'm describing a universe that may occur, and that is where you're going directly to the programmer. You see the sports leagues consider offering their content directly over the top. You see skipping the need for an MVPD. There's a universe where that programming may already be, and you can get some of that programming today. I can go to CBS and get certain programming separate from having a confirmed subscription with my cable provider. So I can see a universe, and I'm not going to say I'm going to predict the universe, but I can see a way where the programmers don't need an MVPD going forward. And we're not talking about, I see a universe potentially where we're not talking about channels anymore. The conversation, when you actually talk to consumers, you talk to millennials, that's supposed to be the new growth. If you want to know what's going to happen in the marketplace, go talk to someone between 14 and 24 is usually the answer. So I do that. What are you using today? And they're not MVPD subscribers. They're not even loyal to a particular channel. They like a particular program. They'll binge watch on a number of different things. I mean, they have different viewing habits, and I think that's a possibility where the market may go.
On the advertising placement, and obviously, as you've noted, we haven't seen the NPRM, but when Chairman Wheeler says the sanctity of the programming will be protected, you won't be able to wrap ads around it or reinsert them, there's nothing in there right now that goes to that point at all.
The FCC does not propose any measures that would guarantee the sanctity of that programming.
Do they propose any measures regarding that?
I think, and you got a chance to read the language, yeah. I think that the verbiage used is market forces. That the sanctity is not considered. It is just left up to market forces, which generally I appreciate the concept of market forces, but here it's used as a complete punt, and so it doesn't answer the question that he perceived to answer.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.